Welcome, everybody. I am joined by a wonderful guest, my boy, the legend, Darryl from Final Fantasy Union. My guy, I'm so happy to have you on here. You got to play Final Fantasy XVI, and that's what we are going to be talking about today with super awesome opportunity. But first of all, for anyone who somehow doesn't know you or your content, which I imagine most Final Fantasy fans do at this point, you guys are, again, absolute legends. Tell us a little bit about what you do and your work.
Hi everyone. So my name's Darryl. I am a part of Final Fantasy Union now because we're a team. And what I do is I send people to sleep with Final Fantasy videos. No, we like have a really strong focus on I guess celebrating the franchise. We decided a long time ago that we wanted to make sure our content was for the most part like making people happy about the games they like. Like if you like 12 or 15 or 13 or 7 or even Final Fantasy 1. No, 2 was the one that came out as the least favorite from that recent survey, right? That's all good. You know, our content is not there to make you feel bad. It's just every game is a game. And they will have their strengths and weaknesses, and we try as much as possible to just kind of celebrate stuff, either through the evolutions videos or our kind of list videos or our retrospective looks through history. We want to make sure that everyone has fun, reminiscing and learning.
Awesome. And we've all had great experiences watching your channel. It's been a huge inspiration for me as a content creator. Again, I know I've said this before, but I want to say it again for everyone who didn't hear it the first time. I probably wouldn't be here without the influence of Final Fantasy Union. So again, I'm just very thankful for you guys and everything that you've done. So glad to have you on here. You were more than just a friend. You are also a personal inspiration to me. So just want you to know that. You and Lauren both.
Well, thank you very much. And yeah, like it's been great to get to know you over the years. It has been years now, which is kind of crazy.
That's crazy.
Right?
That is so crazy. I want to say it's been like maybe 4 or 5 years, something like that. So, before we, so I'm gonna start out with a pretty heavy hitting topic here. There were 2 things that happened actually on the 28th.
On the same day.
On the same day. The one thing that happened is the thing that we're mostly here to talk about, and that is that Final Fantasy XVI received a very extended preview. We got 45 minutes worth of footage. We got previews from channels like yours and Skill Up and a whole bunch of other people. But Square Enix also snuck a little something else in to distract us. They're merging Luminous Productions, the team that is behind Final Fantasy XV and Forspoken, back into the main branch of Square Enix. And this seems kind of like a nice way of saying that we're dissolving the studio, but we're not really doing massive layoffs. So we're calling it a merge back into the branch, because these people mostly get to keep their jobs, is what they're describing here.
Yes, but they will probably be distributed amongst the teams. I mean, they may kind of keep them together, but I guess we'll see.
Right. So I want to ask, did you see this coming in light of the way Forspoken was seeming before release? What's going to happen with Luminous Engine, right? So is Luminous Engine just done now that the studio behind it is no longer going to be working on it?
I mean, I guess there's a couple of things to digest there, right? So, I mean, did I see this coming? I guess part of me is saying yes, and not just because of Forspoken. I think if we're going back, the person who set the studio up left, right? And
yeah.
And I don't want to be disrespectful at all, but the person who inherited the job and actually became the co-director for Forspoken had it was first directorial role. They were the person that kind of came up with Crystal Tool. They were a prominent part of Crystal Tools, and then a prominent part of Luminous Engine. And then they were, effectively made the studio head and the director of Forspoken. And like, I guess it's that hard thing, right? When I don't know how involved other people were within what was then Business Division 2. I don't know how many of them were involved in the decision to create Luminous as a separate entity, and how much of that was just Tabata being like, this is what I want to do. But I think the whole process has been super weird. I don't know if you've saw this, Ryan, but like Gary Whitta did a podcast recently with Alana Pierce, and they spoke about Forspoken. And did you watch that at all?
I didn't watch it, but I think I read an article based on where you're going, right?
So essentially, he said, and like again, timelines are ambiguous. Square reached out. They had an idea. They had a concept for a game they wanted to make, which we know Business Division 2 had around the same time they were trying to think about season 2 for 15's DLC. Because Tabata had said like they wanted to work on this new IP. That's why they launched the studio, so they could have that separation and that freedom to do that new IP. But they also wanted to work on the DLC, and the senior team at Square didn't want them to. And so it caused friction, because they were like, no, you've got deadlines to hit with this new IP. Work on this DLC is gonna potentially conflict with those deadlines. But Tabata and his team were like, no, it's all good. We've got it figured out and everything. So they must have reached out at that point to potentially Gary Whitta, right, with this idea of a story to be like, can you, because like, that was Tabata's thing, right? He was very inclusive. He wanted lots of different people and ideas to be involved. He didn't just want it to be very, very, like, BD2 had like people from all over the world join. It's where Roberto Ferrari kind of came through before moving on to the 7 remake. So Gary Whitta worked on the original script. He said at this point there was no Frey. A lot of the different things weren't there. The main thing he came up with was like the name of the world, which was Athia, and some of the wider world building concepts. He sent it away. It got approved. They liked it at Luminous, and then I think he said like it must have been a couple of months later. Square got back in contact with him saying, we've like done a complete revision of this whole thing. We don't think the story's going to work anymore, and we've come up with all these new ideas for what this story should be.
Hey, you know what though?
Can you rewrite it?
I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to say, isn't it funny that happened to that team twice? Like twice, the exact same thing. But please continue. I just had to mention that irony, because it just can't be lost on you that this exact same thing with Versus and 15, and then the original concept of Forspoken, and then but please continue.
No, it's all good. Yeah. So basically, they got back in contact with him and said like, we want to change all these things and introduce this new character and all these different storyline concepts. Can you rewrite it? And he basically said no, like, I don't have the time right now. So then they went to Amy Hennig to kind of do the next kind of initial draft of things, and then she did some stuff and then passed it back. And then from what I understand, they then wanted to change it again, which is when they ended up with I think it's Todd Stashwick and someone, I can't remember, Amy something or other, who ended up trying to be like the final writers of it. But yeah, Gary Whitta was like, what you see in the game is like basically nothing to do with me whatsoever. Wow. Apart from the name. Yeah, like he didn't write any of the dialogue, like anything like that. Like he just came up with like the super initial concepts, and he was like, fair play to them if they want to use my name, because I did actually work on it, but I don't really know what is left in that game that relates to anything I did. Like it.
That's crazy. And so especially too, because we look at, the kind of like the powerhouse names attached to the game, and on the writing staff in particular. And then
and that's the crazy thing, right? Because
Yeah.
you know, like you're very familiar with, like, if you look at even like the 7 remake, or even going back to like Final Fantasy VII, there would be like a full-on team of people working on the script. You'd have like someone like Nojima, who'd be like the scenario lead essentially, and there would be contributions from all over the development team. But there would also be a full-on team of like event planners. Like that, I think 7 had like, you know, maybe 10 people working on building out the events, the sequences, the dialogue, all these different things. Forspoken had 2 people that worked on the entire script. That's it. As far as
That's
I can
insane.
tell.
That's insane, right? Especially for these modern games, which the scripts of them are exponentially bigger than these older games, right? So
But anyway, so that was a big segue in terms of like, did I see this coming? Kind of, yeah, because the person who had the vision for the studio left pretty soon after, and like my wife Lauren, who's also part of Final Fantasy Union, she had kind of made this observation that if you think about the build up to a typical game, especially from a company like Square Enix, there's generally a lot of press, a lot of interviews. They know that it's important to kind of put faces to the developers, right? You think about 16, it's all about Yoshida, but they're now like talking about Suzuki, Takai's doing stuff now more than he was before.
Yeah.
Like, Koji Fox is there, like they're making like people aware of who these people are. With Forspoken, I don't think most people even know who the director is, or like who was even involved with making it. But it's like Harada, who is one of the co-directors. He worked on like the episode Ignis DLC, like directed that, I think. And then the other guy is Arakami, I think his name is. He was the Luminous guy. But like, I think they must have done like 2 or 3 interviews, and it was like really hush hush kind of things. Like there was no like big like video interviews, no like big press or anything like that. Like you think about like the most recent Toy Edge 16, there's like photo ops everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Like let's get these developers out there. I mean, like they let Alex McCullough do like the Hildebrand pose with the,
yeah.
You know, but yeah, they didn't do any of that, and I kind of feel as though maybe it was because they kind of felt this was like they didn't want to raise anyone's profile, if that makes sense. Because then it would make it more awkward to be like, oh, and by the way.
Yeah, exactly. That is insane, and it does make me wonder too. You know, I'm still kind of curious why Tabata even left in the first place. And he has his new studio now, and we're supposed to see something of that in the near future. Hopefully
I'm still super curious as to what he's working on.
Right.
I think there was like one small he's done a couple of like smaller interviews since he left, and I think one of the reasons he left Square was because of how I think we've spoken about it before, like he did so much work to try and engage with the fans and the community. And like he didn't just make a point of like going to like the hubs of like, oh, I'm going to go to do my media tour in London, or you know, Tokyo, or wherever it is in America, like LA or New York. He was like, I'm going to go to Germany, I'm going to go to Gamescom, I'm going to go to France, I'm going to go to the UK, I'm going to go to I think Mexico. He went to South America, like he went to Canada, like he basically went everywhere to meet up with as many different types of fans as he could. And he realized like how like diverse and the fan base is, and how different cultures operate and work. And then when he went back to Japan and Square, he felt like this isn't kind of me, kind of thing. And like it's quite interesting because you look at JP Games, and they worked on the Pegasus Dream Tour. The first game he works on is like a game about the Paralympics. Like it's all about like, you know, disability, like empowering people with disabilities. A lot of the senior figures who worked on the game are women. It's like a completely different like shift mindset. And like I don't know, he'll probably talk about it one day, but I think he kind of just wants to leave it alone. It's like Sakaguchi, right? He doesn't really want to talk too much about the past, because there was a period when he did. And like he like, when I remember reading when he was talking about like Blue Dragon and Lost Odyssey trying to do promotion, and like he like just like massively ragged on like Ken Kutaragi, saying he was like the worst person ever, and like that's why he was going with Xbox, and like saying he was never going to play 13 because it's trash, or like there was some like really explosive stuff he was saying.
Yeah, he had some colorful.
He's chilled out now.
Yeah, he had some colorful word choice back then. In particular, about 13, which at the time was like, yeah.
This latest. I'm still amazed that Tokyo RPG Factory exists. Honestly,
yeah,
because every other like offshoot studio they have made has been shut down, sometimes without even shipping a game. There was like was it Studio Istolia, where they like hired the Tales of main guy to work on that project, and it just never even. And we saw like that one teaser trailer, and then it was just like, no, it's cancelled now, and the studio shut down. Bye.
And it really makes you wonder too, like, you know, kind of like what's going on there at like a higher management level at Square Japan, that it's like is happening so much so that it's such a frequent occurrence that all of these external studios that they open like immediately get shut down. So
yeah. What about you? Were you kind of like shocked by the news, or?
So I was slightly shocked by the news, because the way I saw it is that, okay, because think about how long like IDOS, for example, and Crystal Dynamics were not making any money, and they gave them like numerous opportunities before they sold them. So I thought for sure.
I guess there's a difference between not making money and making a huge loss.
Right. They were breaking even. They were breaking even, right? So they were making like $1 in profit, and that was like that was it.
Until the Avengers, and the Avengers was like the line where they were just like, no more. more.
Baby Seal says, don't lie. You and I knew the Sunday before Spoken Reviews came out that it was over. I mean, kinda, yeah. But I thought that, like, I had some hope that I was like, okay, this is the team behind Final Fantasy 15, right? The most successful, like, and also like probably like the most franchise growing Final Fantasy, right?
Some of the team.
Oh, really?
Because that's the thing, right? A lot of I don't know how many people left, but it wasn't just Tabata that left, right? There were other senior figures from BD2 who also left when he left.
Right, and I'm sure some of them probably went with him too, right? To JP Games, I imagine. Okay.
I'm pretty sure. So I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that like Kenichi Shida, who directed, he was like one of the main like co-directors on 15. And he directed episode Gladiolus and episode Prompto. I think he left.
Right. Yeah, because
I think the artist, like one of the main artists, he also left as well.
That's crazy. Because see, in my head, I was always thinking, I'm like, well, these guys made one of their biggest successes, so I'm like, I'm sure there is a second opportunity for them if Forspoken doesn't meet sales expectations, right? But I guess, you know, and we don't really know how much or how little Forspoken sold, but it seems that it did less than expectations, enough for them to just be like, yeah, we're just gonna go ahead and shut the studio down.
I mean, like, if you estimate, I think Steam sales are like 200 to 300,000 now.
Yeah.
And it's a PS5 exclusive, so I mean, maybe it sold 1 to 2 million copies.
Right.
But like, you got to think that game was probably in development for 5 to 6 years.
Right, and AAA game too.
Yeah.
So, there's no way that thing made a profit. Which I know some of you are going to think that 1 to 2 million is like a lot, and it is for like an Octopath Traveler or something like that. But for like a AAA game with AAA graphics, that is actually.
Got to do is look at Callisto Protocol, right? I don't know if you saw the news about that, but they had the objective to hit 5 million because I think the game cost over 100 million to make or something.
Christ.
It's ridiculous. Let me find it, because there's a whole thing about it that they just they expected to sell 5 million just because of how the budget for Callisto Protocol was $162 million.
$162 million.
Yeah. And it's only sold like 1 to 2 million, so they're like massively in a hole.
Jesus Christ, man!
The game didn't review that well, and like they pumped so much into marketing, but it's actually sold a lot better than Dead Space, as well. From what I loosely remember.
Really?
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like that, it was just how ridiculous it was. Because Callisto Protocol, they said 5 million, but like if you think about the survival horror genre, outside of a couple of Resident Evil games, Aces didn't sell that much.
Oh, you kind of cut out there for a second. I had a heart attack. I was like, oh no, he's.
We're still there.
Okay. Could you repeat what you last said, just so that I can?
Oh, just like even the original Dead Space series, I don't think any of those sold more than 5 million copies.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. Repadusky in chat says that the cost is absurd because in comparison, The Last of Us 2 cost 150 million, right? So, and I'm sure The Last of Us 2, obviously, that made a massive, massive profit. But I mean, that's still a lot. So for it to even exceed something like The Last of Us 2, and then to sell the tiniest fraction of what something like that sold,
crazy.
Jesus, that is
it's
really
so hard to judge how much things cost these days. But yeah, Forspoken, I mean, like if we think that, so the game was in development before Tabata left, which was like end of 2018, right?
Yeah, it was into 2018.
Yeah, so they were developing that game for a good four-ish years. I think they said that full development had started in 2018. Actually, no, I think full development started in 2018, something like that. So a good 3 or 4 years of development with like more time spent before that. Not too dissimilar development time from 16, I believe.
Right. Which, I mean, and that also makes you think about how much Final Fantasy XVI and how much Final Fantasy VII Remake are going to cost. Like, especially Remake, 16. Which is like probably like insanely expensive, right? Yeah. So it almost, you think about it, it becomes like no question as to why they take like these Sony exclusivity deals from a business perspective, right?
Yeah, I mean, Yoshida like spoke pretty candidly about it the other day in one of the interviews. He basically said like, yeah, okay, we got paid money for the deal, fine, but Sony basically gave us a ton of free money as well because they helped them develop the game. It's kind of like not co-developed, but they gave them like a load of their best engineers to help them with it. Right. And also because it's build up, they're effectively treating it as an equivalent to God of War, right? In Sony's eyes, it's basically like a first party game. So they're giving them a ton of free exposure, free promotion. And Yoshida basically said, like, if you think about how much that would cost us to get if we weren't in this deal, like it would be ridiculous, right? They would be spending tens of millions of dollars on promotional stuff that they're basically getting for free because Sony's going to be promoting them through their own social channels more aggressively. They're going to be putting them all in marketing campaigns which they wouldn't have done. Like, from that perspective, it's saving them a ton of money as much as they gained money.
Right. And I'm sure that like they're probably not completely locked in. Years later, they probably can release it for Xbox and still make some more money. So
but will they?
Is it worth it? I know some Xbox fans get kind of offended by that, but like, is it worth it for them at any point to ever release on Xbox? Because I mean, even 15, I think 15 like barely sold 1 million on Xbox out of like its total 10 million. Yeah.
I think Square a long time realized that their games, they will sell some, but not to the point where it's overly worth it from a cost investment perspective. Because if you think about the Xbox 360 era, Microsoft went super aggressive because they were like, Japanese-made role-playing games are the future. That's what everyone wants because that's what the PlayStation 2 was all about, right? They were like the big games. And so they paid for all these exclusive deals. You had The Last Remnant, Star Ocean was exclusive. Infinite Undiscovery was exclusive, and then they managed to like basically buy Final Fantasy 13 out of being exclusive to PlayStation. But then Final Fantasy 13 didn't even sell that well on Xbox, despite all the push that Microsoft did, and the fact that Microsoft had a bigger market share. Like, and after that, like as you said, like 15 sold okay, but it's like maybe 10% of sales.
Right. Yeah, it's getting to a point where it doesn't really make sense for them to try to be multi-plat again.
They're not even bothering.
The exclusivity deals are just benefiting them so hard that I don't blame them. I really don't. I know that there's a lot of people that do want to see like something like Remake or 16 come to Xbox, but it just doesn't seem like a great idea from their perspective.
I think I looked it up, and if you look at the last generation and this generation, I think the only two games that have really been on Xbox are 15 and Kingdom Hearts 3.
Right.
Everything else has either been a PlayStation exclusive or a Switch exclusive, or it's been released on the PlayStation and Switch.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there hasn't been that many things that. Yeah, I can't even really name that many, unless it's like these smaller titles like A Stranger in Paradise. But in terms of their AAA games,
yeah,
it's just been straight PlayStation sweep, and that's leads us to what we're here to talk about. Final Fantasy XVI, Sony's big PlayStation exclusive. So tell me a little bit about the experience of Square Enix having you come out to this event.
It was pretty crazy, honestly. I mean, like, for many of you probably don't know, but I used to be a games journalist many years ago, like probably a decade ago now. So I used to go to like E3 and Gamescom. I've been to the Tokyo Game Show, and I would get invited to preview events in the UK. But I'd never done one for Final Fantasy. I saw Final Fantasy 13 2 at E3, but I didn't get to play it. I didn't get to play like a preview build or anything. I just got to sit in a room and I saw a video. And they were like, there you go, off you go. And it was like this kind of like, oh, okay. Well, I'm still excited about the fact I'm getting to see the game before launch, but I didn't get to actually play it, so a bit of a downer.
Right.
But like, yeah. So with this, there's people asking if did they pay for travel expense stuff. It was in the UK, so I didn't travel anywhere. I think Skill Up obviously went to Japan. I think he may have been like the only one from outside of Japan. Or like I know there was like some Malaysian publications and some Indonesian publications who may have been part of that like leg. And I know in America they had like Easy Allies and Kind of Funny Games and stuff. A couple of very few, but it seemed to be very like European centric.
Yeah.
It was based in London, so for me it was like I just hop on the train, up we go.
Yeah, because some people were asking like NSP, I couldn't believe they didn't invite you, and then I was kind of looking at who they did invite, and I was like, oh, actually this makes sense. Like these are all European content creators. This event took place in London. Of course they and then they did provide like travel accommodations for a lot of people. And so that started to make sense to me. I was like, oh, okay, that probably is why.
So it was like it was a combination of things. So yeah, it was mostly from the UK side. It was mostly media, because you'd have like GameSpot and IGN and Eurogamer and publications like that, who have obviously got. I mean, Eurogamer is very UK centric anyway, but like GameSpot and IGN have got UK divisions, so they were kind of represented. And then there was a couple of influencers from the UK. So there was Alex McCullough was there, such an awesome guy.
Yeah,
he's just got so much like life and personality. He's amazing.
Yeah, great guy.
And yeah, there's a couple of other influencers there who I didn't know like overly well. So there's a streamer called Frankie who was there. There's a YouTuber called I think Devil Never Cry. I think they're called.
Yeah.
And so it was nice talking to them. And then yeah, like it was one of the things where you kind of walk into a room and there was like Final Fantasy XVI was like set up, like there were so many like monitors all just there, and I just had to sit like just waiting for like an hour and a half, I think it was. And then we kind of got ushered into a room. They were like, "You're going to get a presentation with Yoshida." And I don't think I'm saying anything that hasn't been. I think Skill Up talked about this in his video, right? That he had a presentation.
Yeah.
He said it was an hour long. Ours was not an hour long. Ours was like half an hour, 45 minutes. But yeah, it was like kind of like, I think Gamatsu has kind of put up like a rough transcription of that whole presentation. But it was kind of one of those things where, and I don't want this to sound disparaging, but like, obviously I'm going in there as a huge fan, but not all the media are huge fans of Final Fantasy, right? And so this presentation was basically there to essentially get them up to speed with like who Yoshida is, because there will be people in that room that don't know like what Final Fantasy is all about. Like they even had the thing about the classic line of, if you've never played a Final Fantasy IV, ignore the fact this is number 16, it doesn't matter. Like they had to specify that. And then they spent time talking about the different team members, and then they basically spent some time trying to dispel some of like the myths and rumors that had been circulating, so that the press could kind of field answers to those questions. So like the whole thing about it being super linear and not open world and all that stuff, they like specifically showed us like a 3-minute trailer to say like, oh, we've heard that people think it's not open world. Here's some footage which basically dispels like that myth. Like, it's like, it's not open world, but they've basically said like, we've spent a ton of time building like super large, dense, incredibly detailed areas, and like they showed videos of these areas. And I'm pretty sure at one point, and I need to like listen back because I got a transcription myself, but so don't take this as 100% truth. But I'm pretty sure they said like, you know, it's one of the things where if you're in the field, anywhere you look or anywhere you see, you can kind of go. Right. So
hit him with the Todd Howard.
Like, they showed like Clive standing on this massive kind of cliff, like overseeing like this huge field map, and it was kind of like, it's kind of like the Calm Lands, but with a much grander scale. And yeah, so they were like just really wanted to stress that like, yeah, like it's not open world, but it's not small. Like it's not a corridor. You're gonna go to all these different areas. These areas are gonna be expansive. It's gonna be like Grand Pulse kind of thing. So yeah, like it's they spent time on that. They spent time talking about the combat, the philosophies. They talked about the 4 pillars, such marketing buzz terms, but yeah.
Right. And that's a relief to hear, because, and I got comments about this the other day where people were like, you know, they got like the world, basically Ballistia, held really close to their chest. And I think the combat that we've seen, the footage, has been excellent. But I don't think that's what's going to ship people into hype mode. What people want to see are big zones, right? Like that's the thing that I think, and they're supposed to drop that next month, right? Because I think Yoshida said that April is when they're going to do like the big focus on like the RPG stuff, but they want to start by showing people the battle mechanics. But I think that when they actually show people, this is a very, very, you know, big, meaty Final Fantasy role-playing game, that is when people are going to shift into the hype mode, and that's when it's really going to hit them, right? Because
even now, you've got people saying like, "Oh, it's just Devil May Cry," and it's like, well, Devil May Cry doesn't have these massive open field maps and like crafting mechanics, or does it? No, I don't think it does.
No, it does not. I just beat DMC5 recently, not too long ago. I played it because I wanted to get a feel for this game. And I really enjoyed what I played. I actually need to go back and replay DMC5 some more, because it's one of those games where, you know, the first time you beat it is honestly just the tutorial. I think any really good action game is like that. And you go back and you replay it and you get better and you get triple S ranks on all your missions, and it's really cool. And like Kino says in the chat, the thing that really differentiates, DMC and Final Fantasy 16 is the cooldown abilities, right? So, in TMC, if you just want to kind of keep comboing over and over again in a certain way, if you can do it, then you could do it. And there's just nothing really within the game to hard stop you from doing it, other than, you won't rank as high if you continue to spam a certain thing over and over.
I think I mentioned it in my video that when I was first going through it, and I was and I was thinking about with action RPGs, cooldown timers feel like a death knell, right? Because it's it's something actively stopping you from doing some cool stuff.
Right, exactly, right.
You have to wait. But with the way I don't know what it's going to be like throughout the earlier portions of the game, where you only have 1 or 2 iconic ability sets. But they obviously gave us access to 3 with the demo, and because you're cycling through, by the time you kind of there's so many things going on that I didn't really use my abilities. I saved. I'm a storer. I'm a saver. I don't use. I don't so I would basically use Clive's default ability set for the most part, and then I would basically use the abilities. When you're against the smaller enemies, it doesn't matter too much. But when you're in a boss fight, for example, I would store them up until I got that stagger, and then I would just absolutely rain down pain. And I was getting I think in the demo footage they put out, the most damage they do in a stagger is 5,000 something. I was getting 15,000 damage in those staggers, just spamming just one after the other, bam, 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 and then it would be back to normal gameplay.
And see, and that's kind of what's cool, right? And I believe they mentioned this too, is that you really do have the freedom to kind of choose how you're going to approach that, and there's not necessarily an objective way to do it in most cases, and you can kind of feel out which one is going to be better and how you like to play, which is cool. I like that they have a lot of variety here. I was watching part of your stream the other day, and you mentioned that they kind of wanted you to keep on the ability rings that act as the game's easy mode, and you decided you were a Giga Chad. Immediately took all of them off. And said, no, I want to play the game.
Exactly, right? I really appreciated actually when they were talking about it in the presentation, these rings, I was immediately in my mind was thinking this is such an interesting take on it. Because you think about they made a point of saying if you think about difficulty in most other games that have them, they just pound on more HP to the boss, or they make the boss do more damage, or it's not it necessarily gets harder in terms of the mechanical skill. It's just that if you get hit, it's a one-hit death kind of thing,
Right.
And they were just we didn't want that. And I was thinking Elden Ring doesn't have a difficulty. You've got New Game Plus and stuff where they pound on the HP, but there's no the default game. This is Elden Ring, right? This is it. Right. You can't get through it. Sucks to be you, kind of thing. They wanted to have that and I think that, and there is some confusion about this because they've called them the accessibility rings, but accessibility is obviously something else too, in terms of color blindness settings and all those different things. So I think there's been some confusion around that because of the terminology, but they basically wanted to make the gameplay more accessible, which is why they've called them that. And how they've done it, to me, as a fan of many years, my cogs were turning, and I'm thinking okay, so auto potion, that's a traditional Final Fantasy ability, right? It's in pretty much most games have auto potion, and if you're in those games and you equip an accessory or the abilities use auto potion, you're not thinking, I'm cheating,
right?
I'm making the game so much easier for myself. It's a reverse mentality, right? When you're in those games, you're using it clearly to get an advantage. And if you don't use that advantage, you're kind of stupid, right? Right. Why wouldn't you equip the best possible thing available to you to make you win?
Right. Exactly.
Easiest.
Right.
And as I was going, I died at one point because I forgot about to heal. For some reason, when I'm playing Elden Ring, when you're playing this kind of games, you're acutely aware of what your health is at all times.
Yeah.
And whether or not you need to heal. But in this game, like, I just, maybe because I was like trying to take so much in, like it just wasn't my the front of my mind. So I was thinking like, yeah, I probably wouldn't be opposed to using the auto potion thing. Like, it's not really that much of a change in difficulty. Like, but it meant like that fight I wouldn't have died.
Right.
And like, you know, and it was the thing where I died when the boss had like 2% health left. And I was really thankful they had checkpoints in that boss fight, because I was like, I'm not doing that whole thing again. But yeah, like, and then you've obviously got one that does toggle for you automatically. Like, I didn't even use toggle at all throughout the demo. Like, it's just completely out of my mind. Like, there's so many other things going on, because you've got Clive's combos, you've got the iconic abilities, you've got cooldown timers to worry about. You've got like you've got the kind of the default iconic abilities, which will change your play style. You then got like worrying about health, all the enemies, because there's like tons of enemies in most encounters of what's going on. Like, thinking of like, oh, I've got to press left on the D-pad to change my abilities over to Torgal's commands, and then I've got to think about, okay, which command is Torgal's, you know, because he's got 3 different commands. Like, in that short window I had to play, it was just too much to take in. So I didn't even think about it. So I was thinking like, yeah, I probably wouldn't mind having Torgal like do stuff by himself. Like, it's no different from just having an AI companion, right? Like,
because the thing with Torgal for me that is somewhat worrisome is him having 3 inputs, right? And that's kind of weird, because like, I think of like Atreus in like God of War, and he's the square button basically, right? And so it becomes really easy to mix in Atreus's combos by just hitting square while you're doing your other stuff. And then Torgal's got like, you know,
it's got different types of attack. It's got heal.
And that's when I'm like, ooh, I wish they.
And you got to use it at the right time as well. Like, so you want him to go in. Like, they do it a couple of times in the demo, not very much actually.
Right.
But there are a couple of times where they use Torgal's sick move to like extend the combo, and like, it's really cool when you think about doing that. but like, you know, actually just doing the combos in the first place is where I was trying to get to. Like, trying to figure those out before I then start adding Torgal in as an extra layer on top. It's like the cherry. But yeah, then you've got the other ones. Well, like, you've got the I've got my notes here. My massive notepad of notes that I took. Like the Ring of Timely Focus, which basically says like, if you're going to take like a big damage, slow down time, and you get like the QTE come up to say evade now. Again, I don't really necessarily have a problem with that. Like, if you don't have, like, if you're not necessarily all that keen on action games, like, it's basically the same as like Nier Automata, right? They've got like the chips that will allow you to do something similar.
Right, exactly.
And then you've got like timely evasion, which is basically kind of auto dodge. But like, I actually, like, it was very clear in the demo. I found a specific point as to show like, auto dodge does not mean you're invincible. Right, you'll still take damage. It's not going to make you completely immune to everything. Like, there was one point where in the demo, and you can watch it back, but like, I think it's in the first fight actually. Clive does a Titanic blocks, which means he's on Titan. He's used Titan's circle ability, and he's used it at the right time that it will do a precision block essentially. So then he can do a counter, which is like the 3 massive mega fists. When he's landing the 3rd fist, some guy comes in and just basically stabs Clive in the back. And like, you can see his health bar go down like 10-15%. And there was literally no way that could be evaded, because you're in the middle of doing a move, right? So just by having auto evade on, it doesn't mean you're going to be immune from damage. Like, you'll still be able to take damage, you'll still be able to die.
Right.
It's just like, it will reduce the probability that you will die. And it's the same with like the auto attack as well. Like, to me, that was like immediately Final Fantasy 13, right? Because some people have been asking me like, if I like the turn-based games, is this going to be too jarring? And I was thinking like, you know, if you're okay with 13, you're going to be fine with this, because it's the same kind of concept. Like 13, a lot of your input is around the paradigm shifting, and that Twitch thing. If you think about like that is the equivalent to evading. Right, and then 13's combat basically took care of itself. You basically just hit an X. the whole time.
Yeah.
And like they're reacting and they're adapting to everything that's going on without you having to think about anything really. There is manual input, of course, but most people never use it because it's just too slow. And that's what like the strikes will do. Like it chooses all the best combos to use at that moment in time. It's not going to be as optimal as if you're an experienced action RPG player, but if you're not, then it's basically going to be able to like take care of the offensive side of the game, and you can just focus on the defensive side if you want. Like, you know,
right.
I think doing it this way is really smart because they've given people the choice. Like, if you're better with defending, you don't want to use that ring. If you're better with the offensive side of things, you don't want to use that. Like, whatever you feel like is your strength or your weakness.
You customize it to fit you, fit what your skill level is, right?
The one thing I'm a bit annoyed about, and I think this is going to be really bad, especially if you're a streamer, is that it highlights in the HUD which of the accessibility options you have equipped.
Oh no.
So like above your health bar, there's like 5 little icons, and if you've got one of the rings equipped, the icon will light up, so everyone will be able to know, like, oh, they're playing with auto dodge on, or they're playing with auto attack.
All right. Okay. I guess I kind of get it though too, because it's also kind of like someone will like. There'll always be that guy that will put out like a combo video and be like, "Look at this amazing, look at this amazing combo I did."
Like,
When all they basically did was like equip like one of the ability rings, and like now they're like, "Ha ha ha! I'm like the best at the game." And since that is kind of a focus of this game, is to like be able to show off what you're able to do, I can kind of see like why they would have something like that.
It's gonna be an interesting one to see how that goes.
Yeah, and I'm really into the system that they're using here, because as you mentioned, it's sort of like there are going to be people who are fine with like say comboing, but they're not going to be fine with like dodging, right? And so I feel like there is going to be basically the game wants you to play it. Right, like even on easy mode, it still wants you to play and like actually be active and like try to learn and try to push yourself to actually get better at the game. And I find that to be better than just doing a standard. All the encounters are brain dead easy. You go up to something, you smack it, and then it just dies. That the game is basically coming up with ways to say, okay, we'll handle this difficult mechanic if that's what you struggle with, right? Because usually, I mean, if you really get into it, it's not usually like the whole thing that someone will usually struggle with when it comes to like learning a game.
Exactly.
That's how to. It'll usually be something it's usually something that requires like a lot of precision, like dodging, for example, right? So it'll usually be something like that, where they're like, oh, I'm perfectly fine with attacking, but it's dodging or trying to input commands while I'm doing Torgal. So it allows them to
customize the challenge, right?
Yeah, customize their challenge, right? Until they're able to work their way up and say, I don't need these anymore. I feel like I've gotten so good with the other mechanics that I can space out time. And so to me, kind of what a good action game especially teaches you is that how to play it, right? Like how to there's like a pathway for you to be able to climb the stairs of being better.
And 7 Remake was, like you said, I played through 7 Remake, and like my first playthrough, I'd barely used Tifa that much. I was okay at the game. Obviously, I got through it, but it's only when you play on hard that I started like figuring out. Wait, Cloud's got like this really amazing counter attack that you can just beast everyone with. I never used that in normal. Yeah. As soon as I went into hard, it was like, why wasn't I using this before? And then like you see how like many layers of depth Tifa has as a character, and it's just insane, like how like crazy she is. And like I think even in my review, I got a lot of criticism because I didn't vibe with Aerith at all, because like in that first playthrough, and this was like a game design thing that I had more of a gripe about than more than Aerith's ability set, which is like there was at no point in the game where you were forced to learn how to use Aerith. Yeah, like you were playing with Cloud most of the time. Like he's the primary character, and most people would just stick with that because it's what they know first. And when you get the other characters coming in, you have to proactively want to try and learn to use them, whereas most people will kind of choose the path of least resistance, right?
Right.
There are points in the game where you are forced to play as Barrett. Like, you can use no one else, and there are points in the game where you're kind of forced to play as Tifa. And then Aerith joins Tifa, but at that point you're kind of like, well, I'm kind of getting the jam with Tifa now. Like, I don't want to again make this harder for myself by learning a character when I'm towards the end of the game. But then, like, when I was doing the hard mode stuff, and like there are the combat, the VR simulator and the Colosseum, where you have to use Aerith by herself, and it was only by doing those that I started to like figure out, like, okay, she's actually really cool. Like, her combat is like really, really powerful. Like, you can link all these different things together, and like you start to appreciate it a lot more. But like the game has to like kind of navigate you to, as you said, like it's got to navigate you to that path to make you want to get better at these different characters and skill sets and stuff. Because I played DMC5 on the stream. People were like, why aren't you doing this? Why are you doing that? Like, I'm like, because I don't need to. Like, I'm getting through the game. Like, I don't need to make it any more harder for myself by trying to learn all these crazy, ridiculous combos and stuff. It's like I'm progressing. I'm doing all right.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly,
like,
right. And that's like super important to me in game design too. With Aerith's kit especially, I think it was on like maybe like basically like my fourth playthrough of the game that I really started to like understand her kit, and then that's when I started to because it was with Vice actually. So I played the game twice on PS4, and then I played the game again on PC, and I wanted to fight Vice, and I'm pretty sure I used Aerith with Vice. I was doing some. Was it Pride and Joy? It was one of them. And doing that on hard mode, that's when I like really delve into her kit, and also too with Tifa and like the way that you increase like the stagger bar and like the stagger like percentage or whatever after they've already been staggered.
So satisfying.
It's incredibly satisfying. It's incredibly satisfying. I really, really do love how that works. So. With the game's combat system, how unique does each icon feel? Does it really feel like you're switching jobs when you switch between icons? And did you have a favorite icon? Sorry if that was too many questions at once.
That's right.
Basically, are they all different? And did you enjoy?
I'm gonna answer this question in a weird way. So I'm what I saw made me really, really intrigued as to what the other icons are going to be like. Because the three icons they had in there were so different. Like, and I think this is what I liked about 16 in comparison to DMC5 actually, and also kind of like Stranger of Paradise weirdly. And I don't know if that's a triggering comparison. But like one of my gripes with Stranger of Paradise was that like Jack himself did not have anything that was his, right? He has jobs and he has weapons, and like if you change weapons, his entire combat style changes.
Right.
And like you have the jobs that then kind of layer over small abilities, but like how you like interact with the melee side of things is primarily based on the weapon that Jack equips. So like there's no like Jack in it.
Right.
It's like Jack was basically like, I'd say he was more of like a Bart in that game than and like Clive is in this one in some ways, because like what I like about this, and I said about DMC5 as well, like in DMC5, like when you're playing as a Dante, like he's obviously got the sword, but you can when you changed his weapon, it completely changes his moveset, right? And that's obviously part of the thrill of it in terms of like, you can master all these different play styles. But in Final Fantasy 16, Clive has an ability set, right? He uses a sword, he has magic, and there's the 14 abilities, which I'm sure you've seen the diagram of, and they are Clive's abilities, right? They are always there. So he's always going to attack with a sword in the same way. He's got his jump, he's got his lunge attack, he's got like it's attack burning blade, which is like a launch mechanic. He's got a downward slash. Like he has these moves that are always in his toolkit, irrespective of which icon you're using.
Right.
The icons then kind of layer over that, and that's when it would kind of change your playstyle a little bit. So I resonated more towards Phoenix because I'm, I think, the most generally like a bull in a china shop kind of player in these games. I just like just head on, just beat the crap out of things. And like I liked using the Phoenix because Phoenix has Phoenix Shift, right? So the circle ability basically means you close the distance.
That move is really cool.
Yeah, and you can do a combo strike at the end of it. And then like but Garuda's kind of the opposite, right? So Garuda is you pull things to you. So instead of going to them, you pull them to you. And then there's different applications with it. So again, like it probably wasn't overly clear within the demo footage, but Garuda's ability is context sensitive. So if you're using it against like a small enemy, it will pull them. If you're using it against a bigger enemy, Clive gets pulled.
Yeah, I noticed that, yeah.
So it has 3 different forms. Let me just check the actual names of those 3 forms. One of them's like Deadly Embrace is like the normal one.
And I think Nero in DMC5 works pretty much the same too. So I mean that's kind of like Suzuki's thing, yeah. Because like Nero, yeah, big enemy, usually you pull toward them, and then a small enemy, you're pulling them over to you. So
exactly, but there's a third mechanic for it as well.
Oh,
so
really?
So if you're fighting against like an enemy that has a stagger bar, as soon as the stagger hits half, if you use Deadly Embrace, you'll basically pull them to the floor, and they get like a temporary stagger.
So that's how that works.
Like, yeah, exactly. So you'll probably see it being used against. I think it's used in the fight, the mid boss fight against Benedicta's kind of minions. And it basically makes them vulnerable to damage for like a short window, and you do more stagger damage, which is really cool. But obviously you've got to be paying attention to that stagger bar, and you've got to shift to Garuda at the right point to know to do that move. And then Titan is like the complete opposite. So Titan is like you're basically a tank, and the ability is the Titanic block or guard, and when you guard and you take damage or you avoid damage, your limit bar fills. So you can like basically just be like a turtle and just be like, yeah, come at me, bro. And then you basically like absorb all the damage, and then you can do your limit breaks quicker. But like you also can then tie that in with Clive's taunt ability. Because when I first saw the taunt ability, I was like, why on earth would you, in a game where you have like AI party members, it's kind of like in Elden Ring, right? When you have the spirits, it makes the game so much nicer. Because you're like, just attack that guy over there.
Take aggro off me. Yeah.
It's like why would you purposely choose to do the opposite? Then obviously it's because you can use the parry mechanic and the precision dodges, and like you can use the Titanic block more often. And then with Titan, if you're doing the precision block and you can do that massive counter, it does so much damage. So so those 3 even just as those 3 icons, the gameplay styles were very, very different.
Yeah.
And the iconic abilities also work differently too. Like they've each got strengths and weaknesses. Some of them do more damage. Some of them are better at reducing the stagger bar. You've got some which again, like it probably wasn't overly clear, but Titan's abilities, when you use them, it comes up with a big radial chart. I don't know if you saw that. And that's basically like a hold prompt. So all of the other abilities, the Phoenix abilities are just press, and they do. Some of Garuda's abilities are like button mash, and Titan's ones are you've got to hold, and you've got to release it when it gets in the red. And one of them does more damage when you release it in the red, and one of them does like it extends the range of the attack when you get it in the red.
Oh, interesting. Okay, because for a second I thought that was like a sort of like you have to press it before it like when it lands in the red, but it's a charge thing. Okay.
And this is where like it's really, and you can actually see it in I think the fight against Big Garuda. When you like they go from using Garuda's kind of claw ability, right, which is a massive button mash ability, and then they shift to use Titan, and they're still mashing the button, so it just it cancels out immediately.
Oh, okay.
So like you've got in your mind, you've got to immediately start thinking about, okay, what's the combo I'm trying to do here, because you can easily kind of like misstep in the combo by pressing the wrong kind of button prompt And like like that move auto cancels. It's not going to do anywhere near as much damage as it would have done if you'd held it down. So like you've got to really think about the ordering. And I think it's really smart, especially because you can change the ordering. You can change all of the button configurations around. Like it's like incredibly flexible. And like like I just had to remember, like when I go on Titan, hold the button, just hold the button.
Yeah. I feel like that'll inevitably screw me up like the first few times I do.
I just like you got these three that are very different in playstyles. Like what's Bahamut going to be like? You know, how are they going to make Bahamut different? How are they going to make Ramu different? Like, you know, I'm just so intrigued about like what they're going to do to make, because it's going to be like 7 icons. No, 6 probably, because you got Phoenix. 7, right?
I don't know. I know there's like Phoenix, I think there's like Garuda, 9 total, but Titan, I don't think that you play as all of them. I think
Bahamut, Odin, Ramu, Shiva, Leviathan maybe.
Yeah, Leviathan we still don't know.
So yeah, there's like potentially like 7 or 8 different play styles.
Yeah.
And then each of those icons has like I think 5 abilities as well, and you can only select 2. So like that's gonna like obviously like change things around. Like there'll be so many different potential combinations. And then like I think someone's just mentioned in the chat as well, not only there are different ability tiers. So you spend like a small amount of ability points to learn an ability, and then you can upgrade the ability, and then you can master the ability, and then that basically changes the application of the ability too. And that they basically talked about it in the menu system that the mastering is going to be like really important for playing in arcade mode. And you see in some instances, like when it's coming up and saying extreme, that means that you're using a powered up version of the ability, so using like it's an extreme version. So like the lunge ability, which is done by pressing I think square and X at the same time. If you upgrade it, it turns into extreme lunge, which gives you more range on the lunge. Like it can lunge further. And like I can't remember some of the other ones the top of my head. Let me see if I wrote them down.
Right. And the limit break, is it only Ifrit, or is it like, do you have like each one having their own limit breaks?
I think so, yeah. I think it's only Ifrit.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Right. Okay.
Yeah, like
I'm
dodge,
wondering,
for example.
Right.
Sorry, I was going to say dodge. Like when you upgrade dodge, it increases the dodge window for you to be able to get a precision. So like it's
nice.
Like when you upgrade these abilities, they change the application of it. So like it makes you better at combat and stuff, which I think is really cool.
Right.
Because I wasn't aware initially, because I just did like because there were so many abilities, I was just like do auto selection, whatever, and I'll figure it out as I go along. But when I played through the demo again, I was like, no, I'm actually going to take the time to read all this and figure it out and see what's available to me. And then like it was talking about the mastering and what's the difference between them all, and like some of the abilities have the ability to like proc 4 or 5 different things that come up in the window, which obviously went for arcade mode, which is going to be like crucial to getting higher scores and stuff.
Right. That sounds awesome, man. I'm really excited to play around with the icons, because honestly, just the 3 that they show off in the demo, it feels like this is already a perfectly, I'm like, this is like enough to like, you know, get you through like an entire game right here, like with just this kit. And just that kit alone also seems really fun too. Like, so it just seems insane to think what some of the like in-game icons like Bahamut are really going to be able to do, and the things you'll be able to mix in. And
I mean, we're also assuming they may not have additional ones, right?
Right.
I don't know, because like you may not get Shiva or Sid or Bahamut. Like there may be limits in terms of like which ones Clive will get access to.
Right.
I don't think they've said whether or not that he's going to get access to all of the different ability trees, right?
I mean, I'm under the assumption that he will, because okay, like even in the collector's edition, I think that they put the pins in there for all the playable ones. So the non-playable ones like Leviathan and like the mysterious golem-looking one, there's no pin in the box for it. But if you go look at the trailer, they have like a HUD icon.
That's true. Yeah, people are saying it. I remember now.
Right.
Like they have shown Shiva abilities. They've shown Ram
Right.
abilities. They've shown Odin
Right.
as well.
And so there are icons in the game that are probably not playable, but like are also not discussed in terms of like the normal round of icons. So it's weird. So basically, there's probably going to be icons in there that are strictly boss fights and that aren't going to be part of Clive's arsenal, which is okay. I don't think all of them have to be there, as long as the ones that are satisfactory are there. And also too, I think that like you look at the icons for some people, it may look like a short roster of like what you can do, but I think that the kit is going to be so flexible that
I think that if they did more, it'll be too overwhelming. I think like if you think about them, as party members, like a lot of the games where it's been good are where you've got parties of like 6 or 7 characters, kind of with different nuances. Like when it goes beyond that, it just becomes a bit too overwhelming because you're like, I don't know, like you're never going to use most of them.
Right, exactly. I mean, and that's the way it is with like a lot of, especially older Final Fantasies too, where you choose like your 3 or 4 man team, and then you would never ever switch away from those guys unless the story forced you to. And
like no one in 6, no one's using Amaru, right?
Yeah, no one, right? And like even in 7, there's a lot of people that, how many people have actually played through 7 with like Ketchi being like, a mainstay like in their party. Like it's not very many people do that, right? So maybe in remake, I don't know. But yeah. So I get it. There's gonna be stuff that some people just explicitly just don't use. Speedrunners, yeah, that's true. Speedrunners do use Ketchi, but like normal people just playing through the game for enjoyment, yeah, they're probably not.
Speedrunners don't enjoy what they do.
Yeah, some do, but it's a performance art. I skipped one of the questions on my outline. Has playing Final Fantasy XVI changed your perception of the game? Has it made you more favorable of it? And could you see it being one of the better modern FF titles overall?
Yeah, I'd say. I mean, we put up a poll yesterday about whether it's changed like your opinion of things, and I think it has increased my level of expectation. Like what I played was, I think I said to you, like the barometer for me is, did I want to carry on playing?
Mm-hmm.
I did. I wanted to learn more. Like I'm curious about a lot of things, and like my main thing is that I want to see if what I saw translates to the rest of the game, because like I think we worked out like what the demo probably is about 1% of the game.
Right, right.
In terms of like the time it took and how long they've said a typical playthrough would take. So like, what's the rest of the game going to be like? Because the castle has so much personality to it, and like I've been like you kind of see it a little bit, like the characters and the personality that's there, like the performance is really strong,
right?
And like I'm like expecting the story to just be like an absolute like gut punch.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you're like even like if you think about like the swearing, because there is swearing in the demo.
Yeah.
And like you compare it to the other game that had swearing, like that game used swearing for the sake of it, right? There was no real point. There were so many lines of dialogue.
Which is the other game? Stranger of Paradise or Final Fantasy VII Remake?
Was spoken.
Oh. The third secret thing. Got you.
That game.
Got you.
I had like swearing for the sake of it, right? Like it like there are so many lines of dialogue where it didn't need to be said. And in this game, it feels as though when they're swearing, it's like it's gonna you feel it like when the Benedicta like just like punts Torgal.
Yeah, she's like fuck dog.
Yeah, like when I was playing the demo, I was kind of like,
Oh,
chill.
yeah.
Like, come on, like this is, you know. But it like her reaction just felt so right. Like
Right.
it just felt so perfect. And then you just see Clive like channel his inner John Wick to be
Yeah.
like, no, you don't do that.
Yeah. Oh my god. And like, by the way, how phenomenally well voiced are these characters, man? They're just so like well voiced. Like in I mean, the scripting and the cinematography of the scenes is just, you know, really next level. And I feel like this is something, you know, especially that this team has kind of been, you know, aching to do, because on 14's very, very limited, you know, cutscene tools and what they've been able to make over the years has been really cool. But, you know, 14, it's really expensive to put in a whole bunch of custom animations for an ongoing game like that. So they kind of have to make use of like a lot of stock animations, a lot of stock camera angles and things like that.
Yeah.
So what happens in 14 and what the way they usually compensate for that is that they have like really incredible voice actors. You know, some of the best British voice actors they can find, and then they combine that with like an incredibly strong script. And the way they're localizing this game is also insane too, by having like Koji Fox basically, you know, they described it like he's like literally sitting next to Mihiro and like literally writing things out there. He's like, okay, you know. And the fact that the like even like the Japanese voice acting for the game is more of a dub than the English voice acting, because they had to tweak the Japanese script in order to match the English lip sync and the English timing of scenes. So it's like, it's actually like the original language is actually playing in English. It's crazy.
Exactly. And I think that makes it like, it's going to make a huge difference, because like obviously like it's a bit of a trope, right? The Japanese voice acting is usually superior.
Right.
Like they get the emotion in there in a much more convincing way typically than an English dub. Whereas this has been done the opposite way around, right? It's they wrote the English script first, they did the English voice acting first, and the Japanese cast are matching the English, whereas normally it would be the other way around, like James Arnold Taylor trying his absolute best to mirror the Japanese voice actor playing Titus. But yeah, this time it's like it's the other way around, and like so they've been given a load of like ways to express themselves. And like I think the other thing that's really gonna help, especially I don't know how it's gonna resonate with Americans, honestly, but they seem to be okay with like Game of Thrones and stuff. But they said they specifically wanted to cast like English actors so that the accents were believable. Like everything you're seeing is believable,
Right?
Whereas like, you know, typically you would get like, oh, let's cast some like, you know, American actors. It's easier. We're all based in the same place or whatever, and we'll just kind of get them to do an English accent. But they wouldn't be able to nail like the different regional dialects. And like I'm sure you're familiar, but like England has so many regional dialects in such a short space.
Yeah.
It's such a tiny country in comparison to like a normal US state. Right. But like there are so many different regional dialects that have such character to them. I think Koji Fox said like they specifically hired a load of Geordies, and they're basically like from Newcastle, which is kind of like close to the border of Scotland. They talk in a very specific way, like that is very, very different from how I talk. But like they've done it so there'll be like distinct regional differences as you go around, like you interact with like the Dalmatians and like the Rosarians and like the people from Wallodes and stuff. Like they'll all talk in a different way. Like so I think in the demo, all the soldiers and stuff are speaking in the way that people from Wallode will talk. So you'll be able to easily tell where someone's from based on how they speak.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. And I really don't understand why more role-playing games in general don't actually leverage like accents in their dialogue. It's always been like really weird to me that they don't, because I'm like, we're supposed to believe that all these people come from, different cultures and probably speak, different native languages even. And like, why don't they leverage?
I don't know if you've been. I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan or not. But like,
I'm not well versed in Star Trek now.
The new season of Picard. So you must be aware that Patrick Stewart plays Jean-Luc Picard. He has a very quintessential English accent, despite being French. And he, in the new show, there is a character who is rumored to be his son, and he talks with a distinctly English accent, which is why the rumor is there. But he has never had any exposure to anyone other than American. So why would he talk with it? Like, why would he talk with an English accent? But it feels like they've done it to like make this connection of like, oh, these two characters are related, so they must talk the same way. But like, no, like, it's like it doesn't make.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
It's a theory, Like I don't think anyone actually knows yet whether or not it's like the connection is real. But like it just
the accent's in the genes, man. It's in the genes. Oh man. God. And then his son is the new bad guy from You. In terms of Ryan would understand. That's funny. That's right, because we got Ben Starr. He's gonna be on.
Oh yeah, he's in You, right?
Yeah, he's gonna be in You. I'm really excited for that. I actually really like that show. It's a guilty pleasure of mine. So do you have a favorite character yet from the ones that you've seen?
I mean, like, it's hard. Like, I really want to learn more about Sid, and I really want to get to know Sid. I think like Clive. I meant Clive. Sid seems cool as well. Honestly, like, they each have their pros, right? I don't know how many of you guys have watched the full cutscenes. Like, I ran through on stream yesterday, but I kind of skipped most of it because I don't want to spoil the story for people that don't want to have the story spoiled for themselves. I didn't have a choice because I obviously played it. So like, it was actually like, I don't know if I should say, but I'm going to anyway. But what has been revealed was not all the story sequences. There's stuff that's kind of cut out. And they like Yoshida basically said before we went in there, he was just like, so what you're about to see is uncut. We've not like taken any bits out. You're gonna see some hardcore stuff. Please be responsible and don't spoil it for people. So I'm not gonna like sit here and suddenly be like, oh, this happens, like, oh, it's been amazing. Like like they're like the relationship between the three main characters we see. Actually, there's another character who appeared in the demo, though, who I don't believe is in the footage you saw, called Geralt.
Really? Perfect name.
Yeah, I know. It's spelled differently though.
Oh, okay.
But the fact they even gave him a name, that's a win for me. I think it's Geralt with a U. I wrote down.
With a U?
Not yeah. With a U. But no, like the dynamic you see in the small sequences between like Sid and Benedicta, like that to me is like really intriguing. And like I'm so curious to learn like more about, like, because that's the thing, like obviously the focal point is going to be Clive, right? It's going to be his story for revenge, and he's going to interact with all these characters as he goes through. But from what I understand, the way they've done the story is going to be really smart in that there is no party in the traditional sense, but all these characters are going to have their own story arcs, even still. So like, right. Sid is not just going to be some throwaway character, right? Sid is going to have like deep backstory, like a deep narrative arc.
Right.
It's going to relate to Clive. It's going to relate to Benedicta. It's going to relate to other characters that are in the world. And like, I guess in my mind, like I don't know if you've ever seen the thing about like tactics and how like Sakaguchi's saying that Matsuno had this like really intense relational diagram, and where like it wasn't just like this guy's brother, and like, which is what it would be in like a normal Final Fantasy. You could like in the Final Fantasy 15 Ultimania, they've got like this like character map where it's just like best friend. Whereas like
Oh god, that almost reminds me
yeah.
of those like Stranger in Paradise bios when they released it, and they were like, "This is Ash. He trusts Jack a lot."
This is Jed. He trusts that Ash trusts Jack a lot.
God, yeah, for sure.
This is Sophia. We don't know. Like, she's there.
Yeah. So
But yeah, like it feels more like it's going to be like the tactics one where it's like, you know, this is Sid. Like there will be like he clearly has like a deep and strained relationship of betrayal with Benedicta. Like they used to be kind of like mentor mentee kind of thing, and like Sid obviously like she decided to turn her back on him,
right.
and like Clive's just kind of like, okay, like I really know what's going on here, like, you know, do you like, you know, in that sequence it's like very much like, you know, hold your horses, buckaroo, like, you know, let the adults handle this.
Yeah. And you could just within like that really short scene of Clive and Benedicta talking to each other, with the way the dialogue was, with the way the script was, with the voice acting, with the cinematography, you felt that there's something there and how wrong it went. And
I mean,
yeah,
going through your Rolodex of cutscenes that you've seen over the years, can you think of another cutscene where the main character has a sub character basically say like, can you take a step back, please? It's my time to talk.
Yeah, yeah. It's not.
Like,
yeah.
Like in 13, it happens a bit. Like Lightning kind of gets ushered, but it's not like a proactive thing. She just kind of like blends in. As the story goes on, she just kind of disappears into the background, and other characters kind of take the spotlight. Like, but they're already there. Like when the cutscene starts, like it's clear that it's going to be focused on Snow at this moment, or Vanille in this moment. But in this one, it was kind of like Clive tries to step up, and Sid's like, back off, son. Like, take a step back.
Yeah.
And like he basically just gets removed from the scene.
Yeah.
And like
I
yeah,
liked
like
it.
they
Yeah.
I just thought that was really, really cool. And then like obviously that builds into the scene that happens later between Clive and Benedicta. Like it adds an extra dimension to that conversation. Like it's not just Clive going to have the conversation that he was trying to have before Sid was like, no, you're not having this conversation right now. It's now Clive saying, okay, I wanted to talk to you about this, but now I'm kind of mad about that. So we're going to have a chat.
You know, one of the things I feel like that this game opens up possibilities for that I haven't seen anyone else like really talking about is that when you have a fixed party when you have like a fixed party, and the characters have to be with you the whole time because those are they're a gameplay mechanic. They have to stay in the party. It actually kind of limits what you can do and where you can go with certain story elements, because you can't really remove them as a mechanic that you spent millions of dollars creating, right? Because these assets are really expensive, and making a playable character is extraordinarily expensive, right?
I think with 13 they realized it, because like every game prior to that there was a clear protagonist, like dead on nailed clear protagonist. Some games had like you know, a gray area, like, you know, you could make a case for Yuna being the protagonist. You can in 6 you can make a case for like Terra or Locke or Celes being the main protagonist. But in most of the games it's like, this character is the big cheese. Everything revolves around them. And like, but with 13, they were like, no, we want to have like 6 characters who are kind of on an even keel with each other. Like they're each going to get their moment to shine, and it's not going to be like the previous games where like we just did Freya's origins, right? Her story after disc 1 ends.
Right.
Like she's there to kind of make up the numbers, say a few lines of dialogue here and there because you know her, so those lines actually mean something. But it's not like, okay, we're going to focus on Freya again now. It's like, you know, she had her time, and like, you know, 7 Red 13 has his story arc in Cosmo Canyon, and then just kind of goes into the background. They each have their kind of like little arc, and they fade into the background. Whereas 13, they were like, okay, this is Lightning's time, now it's Hope's time, now it's Snow's time, now it's Vanille's time, now it's Fang's time. Like it each revolved around their like Eidolon battle, and you know, like after the halfway point, Snow takes more of a leadership role, Lightning kind of fades into the background a little bit more, and like there wasn't like that focal point because they were trying to give them all the spotlight at the same time.
Right. But
they didn't have enough time to do that. Like you think like Friends, like all 6 are kind of like even keelish in terms of like the billing. They all kind of get their own time to shine, but there are still even kind of focal points in that series. Like, you know, like Phoebe is kind of like a supporting character, unfortunately for Phoebe. But like, yeah, in 16, like 13, they really struggle with that. Like, but then after that, they basically haven't done it again. Like 13-2 was a story about 2 people. Essentially, it was, you know, Sarah and Noel, and they didn't even want to have Noel. They wanted to be Sarah.
That's very Toriyama. Yeah.
Yeah, Katase was like, we're gonna learn our lesson.
Yeah.
But then Lightning Returns was just Lightning, right? And then 15 was pretty much Noctis with all the other guys there very much to support. And like I feel as though like they've really tried to learn like what they need to do to make it that strong story. As you said, like you got to have that focal, that the person who gets behind. Like you think about other popular, like Geralt is such a strong character because he's given that time to grow. You see how he interacts with all these different people in all these different scenarios, and you're focused on that character the whole time. It doesn't mean other characters can't exist and grow as well, but like they're not like the main objective.
Right. I mean, for that reason, I think Clive is probably going to end up being the strongest protagonist in the series, or at least he has the potential to, right? Like, I mean, if they don't goof on the writing, there's pretty much no excuse for Clive not to be like the most fleshed out, believable protagonist.
Yeah, no, completely.
Yeah, because I mean, like, with everything so centered on him, he's going to be a character I think that you're going to feel for in a way that is a lot more, because they have all this time to just really focus on him too. But I think too, the way that his relationships don't have to strictly focus on like a party, and having those characters there all the time at every single moment. And then also, it's easier to kill characters, which I kind of feel like this game is gonna do. In a game with playable characters, right? Like with killing Aerith is like part of the reason it hurts so much is because they built all this stuff around her, right? They build like a lot of stuff, and that's part of the trick, right? It's part of the magic trick is building all that stuff around her. And it takes a lot of time and money to do all that stuff. And so I think that here it's a lot easier to just say, hey, this person isn't a gameplay mechanic, so we can kill them, right? And you don't have to feel like we don't have to like replace it with something else or anything like that. You could just really feel the loss of that character. So I think that's actually, it's going to allow the story to be more flexible in that sense. So I want to ask, how do you think the visuals stack up compared to Final Fantasy 15 and Final Fantasy 7 Remake? Obviously, Final Fantasy 7 Remake is kind of like a half-gen game, because it's tied between Intergrade and Intermission and PS5. And then we have Final Fantasy 15, which you can go ahead and compare it to the Windows edition, which I think is probably the most apt comparison. Where do you think it stands?
I'm not like a massive like graphical fidelity like crazy person. I know like that's the kind of the way the industry's gone, right? Where you've got like, I was talking about it on my stream yesterday, like people talking about frame rates, and I'm like, I don't really care that much. Like I grew up in a generation where frame rates sub 10 were realistic. Like that was a norm because like we didn't have like, if you were playing on a console, fine, but like I was a PC gamer and like you couldn't afford the hardware, so you kind of play with what you had. Is you either play like with crap performance and get used to it, or you don't play at all, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, so I've never been overly bothered by those kind of things. Like when all the stuff started coming about the 7 remake and the door and like the rocks and stuff, I never noticed any of that. Like I wasn't even paying attention. And like obviously when you go and look for it, you see it, right? And and like, you know, you have digital what was the one they did recently where it's a big comparison between Xbox Series X and Series S and PlayStation 5. I can't remember which one it was, but it was like, you know, you're saying like, you know, PlayStation 5's on like 58 frames per second, and Xbox 360, Xbox Series X is on like 56 frames per second. Everyone's like, oh, you know, PlayStation 5 is so much better. It's so much better. It's like, if you didn't know this comparison existed and you were just playing on the Xbox version, you wouldn't even care, right? It like you honestly wouldn't care. Like it's all these comparison videos that started coming out around like the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 era. I feel has been pretty damaging in that regard, because like if you just played with your eyes like this and you didn't know that better version was over there, it wouldn't ruin your enjoyment of the game that you were playing. But when you know something better is available, it instantly does, because you're like, oh, no,
it depends. I think because like with the PS4 version of Remake, there were stuff that even with no comparison to, and it being the only hardware I could pay for, I could play it on. There were things that like
slow, right? So I know I'm going to be really weird with this, right?
Yeah.
But like when I get slowed down in games, I always kind of treat that as like a cool moment.
Yeah.
Obviously depending on what's happening. Like if the slowdown is happening because like I have like just pushed the game to its limits. Yeah. Like I've done like some crazy stuff, like, you know, there's particle effects flying everywhere.
Kind of feels rewarding, right?
Exactly. Like it's like that kind of like that. Obviously, if you're playing like a live service game where you're playing against other people, not fun. Right. But if you're playing like an offline game and like those kind of things are happening, like sometimes it can give you an advantage as well, because it gives you a bit more time to think. It's like an inadvertent slowdown of time.
You unlock turn-based mode.
I mean, like, okay, the best example I can give you is that I grew up in Europe playing games 50 frames per second. Right? We didn't have 60 frames per second, whereas Americans did. Yeah. And like, you know, playing, like someone's actually mentioned like OG Final Fantasy VII PAL was the battle system was 15 frames per second.
Jeez.
Right? You don't even like. I didn't even notice. I didn't care because it's all I had. Right? That was my only frame of reference. And like, it made games easier in some regards. Like we were having a conversation with some friends like about Tekken. So I played Tekken 50 frames per second for years. Tekken 3, Tekken Tag, they were all 50 frames per second. Tekken 4 was the first game that actually added the ability to go 60 frames per second, but only if you had a TV that supported it, which most didn't over here. And when I played 60 frames per second, it was like playing the game at 1.5 speed. Like it was crazy. Yeah. Like it was so hard for me to kind of adapt to it. but like, you know, us playing like old school Mario Kart and stuff, like, you know, the game just ran slower. Like there was more time to kind of react, get better at things, like perfect combos, like all these different things. So like I don't know, maybe it's just my generation. I don't care that much about it, but like what I would say is that when I was playing through the 16 demo, and like there are obviously moments in 7 remake where you think like, whoa, like everyone looks up at the plate and it's just like, wow, that's so cool. But there are other moments where you're just kind of like, you know, whatever. Like they probably could have done, like the the thing did the NPCs look like trash? Like that's usually my barometer.
Yeah, that's actually a great question, dude. I mean, did you see any NPCs and do they look like trash?
I only saw that one guy, Geralt, and he didn't look like trash. Okay. But like, I made a big thing about it in my review, and I talked to you about it in Stranger of Paradise, where there's the NPCs, and they all like have the same. There's like that crowd scene.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's just like there's like 5 NPCs that have the same like exact same model. They're just wearing like a different shirt.
Yeah, that was painfully.
Yeah, that's the kind of performance things that I pay attention to. And like, yeah, Stranger of Paradise was not like a good looking game by any stretch of the imagination. But like when I was playing through 16, like if you look at the demo, like the thing that I really love is the attention to detail with the graphics. Not necessarily like the fidelity and stuff. Like, yeah, the lighting was a bit weird, but obviously like it was, if you think about it from a realistic perspective, it's the middle of the night. You're in a castle that is lit by torches. So it's going to be pretty dark.
Yeah, that was kind of like a problem for me. I was like, this is so dark. Like, it's
and like, you got to bear in mind that when I was playing the demo as well, I was playing it in a very lit room. So I had glare as well on the monitor that I was playing on, so it made it even like harder to see. Whereas you guys are watching all this footage on like really nicely, lit things and stuff. So that was an interesting thing for me. But yeah, like when you just in that initial demo when Clive's like walking up the stairs in the castle and he's going into like the prison cell area, like if you look at the detail of those rooms, like the archway of the door, right? It's not just like a load of stones that are just the same. Every single stone in that archway is different from every other stone. There's some that are like fat and like go really far into the wall. There's some that are thin. There's some that are small.
Wow.
It looks like a real castle, which I know obviously, I'm English. I've seen real castles.
So yeah, he knows, chat. This is
like
they're
not like the modern castles are like more like perfectly smooth rock and everything, but like the older castles were basically just made with whatever they could find, and like the like all the if you look at it, like even the walls, like they're all made up of stones that are completely different shapes and sizes, and like to me those kind of details are like really really cool to see. And like as you go through the castle, like one of the things that I was really impressed with, and this is where I say like I really hope it's representative of the full game, is that no part of that castle looked the same. Like you've played Elden Ring, right? So you know about the procedural dungeons.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I feel like I've been here before.
Right.
Like obviously like they have the set piece dungeons that aren't like that. But like this like everything like flowed, and like it like there were parts where you could like explore a little bit as well. Like it wasn't like there was a path you had to follow, but you could go off the path and you could unlock small shortcuts and stuff. You could explore, you could find items and chests as you went through. Like none of that was in the demo that you saw, but just for reference.
Right, yeah.
It was very very quick, narrow. Which is why you were saying like 45 minutes. I probably played that. It probably took me like maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours to beat the demo.
Oh, okay.
I think.
Yeah, so we're seeing.
But I also was writing a load of notes and exploring tons. But yeah, like as you're going through that demo, and again, you won't have got this sense from watching the footage. Clive is basically trying to get from. You start in the dungeon. Like the absolute basement of it, right? Even that room that Clive started off with, where in the demo he just walked straight forward up the stairs. The first thing I did was like that room is actually quite large.
Oh, really?
You can like walk around the room, and there's like I think there's like a skeleton in the corner, and like and like as you go around, because like Clive's using his fire ability, like the walls and everything, like the water all lights up. It's really cool. And like as you go through, like Clive is basically on this mission to get to the top of the castle, which is where the fight with Benedicta happens. So as you're progressing through, you're going through the different parts of this castle. So like first of all, you go through like the prison cells, and then you go through into like the area where it's like a kind of a barracks, and then you go to like an outside area. You can look over the wall and see into the woods, which is really cool. And then you're going to like different parts, and then you there's like kind of these mid encounters where there's like a courtyard areas. It's like a big encounter where you have like the waves of enemies coming in, which is like this really, really, really big open area where you have enemies like on all sides kind of things. And like again, like you didn't see it in the demo, but there's lots of different types of enemies too. There's like the mages are like a really big thing for me, because they can cast defensive spells, but they can also heal the allies. So you have to kind of like focus on taking them down. What you didn't see that in the demo at all. Like what? Like there's heavier types of enemies. I think you see them in like one point of the demo where Clive uses Burning Blade, but again, it's like not obvious that he's doing that. And they'll like, you know, the tough guys who are like blocking attacks, and you've got to break their guard. But this is all happening at the same time. There's dogs in there, not Torgal.
No.
Enemy dogs. But yeah, as you're going through, like Clive's like he's going up winding staircases like in a normal castle. Like, you know, he's going around like, you know, different the turrets and stuff, and he's just on this mission. Like I don't know how many floors this castle has, but it felt like a lot of floors.
Really? And that's cool, yeah, because the flaws and stuff, that's like really where the details are, because they have to manually, you know, chip away at something.
Exactly, and like, yeah, as I said, like as you go through, like nothing felt the same in this castle. Like each room, like yeah, like at one point I went to someone's bedroom.
Yeah, jeez.
And like, you know, I think in the room where you have the first encounter, there's actually a side room where it's like their kind of like office. And like even if you once you go up the even right at the beginning, he goes around the corner and there's some torches, and like there's a table, and like there's like someone spilt a cup on the table. There's like a water spillage and stuff. Like
Jesus, man.
It's like got all this, like, you know, there's different coats of arms on the wall as well. Like, and like I feel as though when you get into the actual game, like this is gonna like be so cool. Like lore hunters are gonna go through this game with like a fine tooth comb and like find all these tiny details, kind of like they do in like Souls games and like the Zelda games, to be like, did you know like this person like stays in this room, or like, you know.
Yeah, baby seal. That means that if you're still in chat, that's gonna be good for you. You're gonna get to have a SEAL Team 16.
And he finds the images in the portrait. That's the
question. Yeah, finding some really interesting stuff. That's really cool. I had saw some previews mentioning about how just ridiculously detailed these environments are, and how they just meticulously like went through. And yeah, like that really sells it to me that these are like insane environments that we haven't seen before. In a Final Fantasy game.
And like I mentioned in my video, like the item descriptions are crazy. I think at the end of the Benedicta fight, there's a level up and you get some spoils in the demo. And just like if you read the item description they show, like it's really detailed, and like the strength tonic, it's not just like increases your strength. It has like the description that talks about basically like it's kind of like this it's like a drug. Kind of like they would have given like soldiers in World War II. Like you're basically like injecting like cocaine in you to like get you amped up and like
based.
It's like really like hardcore in terms of these descriptions. Like they're not like playing around with like these kind of like normal. Oh, this potion restores 100 HP. It's kind of like, no, this potion is like kind of like a placebo that is like making you feel a bit better.
Yeah, and yeah, that's what I really love about, you know, kind of like what this team does, is that they do have like a lot of stuff that they put into these games. As I was mentioning before, technical difficulties, Gunblade lore, for example, where like Gunblade lore in like 8 and 13 is basically Gunblade Go Burr. Like that's that's basically the lore of Gunblades in like that, right? And then like in 14 they have a whole ton of stuff like on Gunblades there about how, like, you know, the ammunition is charged with ether, and how, you know, you have like the Empire who basically creates like they basically create like fake kind of like knockoff Gunblades to like kind of emulate like the real thing. And there's just like a ton of like fleshing out of like the Gunblade that doesn't even actually exist in the source material of it. So they're really good at taking like, you know, kind of like established Final Fantasy concepts and just kind of like writing like some really interesting, very believable type of backstory Because I saw in your video, it's like, yeah, you take like a normal Final Fantasy game and you kind of boot it up, and a potion is just restores 100 HP. There's not like is that any kind of like story behind, like, you know, like I wonder kind of how like people use potions in this, where a potion just like a gameplay thing, but here it's kind of like, yeah, this is like a very common practice that people do, is that they gather these herbs up and then they mix them into a potion, and just from like the item description alone, you believe that potions are like a super normal thing in this world. Like this is like part of like the medical system in this world, exactly. Right? Yeah. So, and it's really cool, and to see them get to do that in like a single player game where they can really sit there and like kind of like bring like everything together.
The fact that they specify that they're typically used on frontline soldiers, like, you know, potions are like the last thing for like cannon fodder people to use, basically. Like,
yeah, like that's like insane, right? Which, I mean, like now potions, like this like simple item has like this like incredible amount of depth to it that it just wouldn't have normally. That's probably the biggest thing that I would get up with this team.
To bring it back about the graphics, I'd say that I'm not the best person to answer about like how fidelity it is in comparison to the 3, because I know 15 has some great things with like hair and stuff like that, and but like, yeah, I'd say that like the attention to detail is like spot on in every aspect, not just not like, you know, like. Well, I spent some time. I just basically had like a massive nerd out with like when in the second. So that just for everyone's reference, the 45 minutes of footage it was 2 separate demos. So you've got actually there was 3 demos actually we played.
Because one was Young Clive, right?
Yeah, so there was a tutorial with Young Clive. You had the dungeon, which was the second demo, and then once you finished that, then you could access the third demo, which was the fight against the icon, Garuda. So like they're not like back to back. Like they all took place at 3 different points in the story, as far as I'm aware.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it's not like, oh, you had the fight with Benedicta, and then you're fighting against Garuda. Like, yeah, I believe they're like quite separate. But in as Clive's walking up the mountain, and like there's the wind and everywhere, like just like obviously there's some like, you know, really subtle music playing, but just like listen to the sound effects. Like they are so good. Like you've obviously got the wind, and like also the visuals are intense, and like the way the Burning Man just kind of disappears at like different points looks really cool, like from an illusion perspective. But like there's one point where like a boulder comes flying down in front of Clive, and like you feel like you don't just see the boulder hit and like the screen shakes a little bit, but the sound effects for me is what sold it, because it genuinely feels like this massive like chunk of rock has just landed directly in front of you, and then you hear like the rubble kind of splinter out from it as well and like land on the floor too. Like they've spent so much time on like just these small details in every single area of like presentation, which I was like, I was kind of blown away with.
That's awesome. Wow, that sounds amazing. I got like a nice surround sound system in there. I really can't wait to hear it, knowing that the sound effects are all that well recorded.
I would recommend listening to that bit again and just just listening to that boulder hit and just thinking like, okay, yeah.
So chat, go ahead and like start sending your questions in. I'm gonna you know, ask like my last couple one. Actually, I'll ask this one like really quickly. Can you ask how is the haptic feedback during those moments?
I think the haptic feedback is not like a main focal point for them. The thing that I really remember was lifting up doors. So like during parts of the demo, like Clive and Sid will lift up a door, and you have to hold R2, and then you see like the circle getting bigger. Basically, as the circle gets bigger, the trigger gets harder to press. So there's like a kind of a sense of like, like it's you can kind of feel the exertion that they're employing. But outside of that, like I think it's hard for them to put the haptic, like the triggers, especially in terms of combat, because they're related to the icons. So R2, you hold down R2 to get access to the square and the triangle iconic abilities, and you press L2 to cycle through them. So I feel as though it will be hard for them to do it because there's not really a need as such in that way.
It would be cool though if like the sword, like a heavy attack was mapped to it and you could feel the enemy cutting through. That would be cool.
Yeah. I mean, like I honestly, like I know that it was a tech demo, but like the way that Astro's Playroom implemented like the DualSense was like it blew my mind. Like it was so good. I'm sure you played Astro's Playroom, right?
Actually, I haven't.
I
have a PS5. Yeah, and it's like, never. Yeah.
Astro's Playroom is one of the best games on PlayStation 5.
I hear that actually.
That's not a joke.
I hear that actually. Mike said that too. He was like, "Yeah,
you'll play through that game and you'll be just thinking like, how is this possible? Like you'll be walking through a sequence and then all of a sudden like Astrobot's like head turns into an umbrella and it starts hailing and you feel it in the controller. Like you feel like the rain and like the textural change. Like if you're in sand and stuff, like when you're rolling the ball, like whatever you're seeing on the screen, you feel in your hands.
Wow.
And like I've not really seen another, like Elden Ring has it a little bit, like when you're riding a horse and stuff. But like I haven't really found another game that's like done it as well as Astro's Playroom has done it. And like 16 didn't really seem as though it's going to be a big thing. But like I don't know what's going to be like in the full game.
All right, so here is my last question. We'll take some from the audience. This is kind of a juicy one. This game goes in quite a different direction than Final Fantasy VII Remake's combat, which was an incredibly well-received combat system and one that I'd probably consider to be probably the best battle system in the series. Which direction do you see Final Fantasy going in the future? A more hybrid system like 7R or a more action-oriented system like 16? Do you have a preference?
I can see it going in both directions. Or at least I hope it does.
Yeah.
Like we've talked about this a lot in terms of like the kind of like the DNA of Final Fantasy has gone in so many different directions. And like before Sakaguchi left, he kind of realized that the fan base was it was splitting up, right? You had the 8-bit and the 16-bit era fans, and you had like the new generation of fans who were 3D, and they were completely different sets of fans. Like I feel as though what we're going through right now with 16, and I tried to make this comparison in the video, is how those 16-bit fans must have felt when they saw 7 Remake, and they were like, this isn't the game that Final Fantasy, it's not like what I want. Like, this is so different from everything I know. But the whole thing with that was that 7 brought in so many fans that those original fans who liked 1 through 6 were dwarfed like overnight. Like they became the minority. Essentially. Yeah. And like what the Final Fantasy VII fans wanted became what the franchise was. Like that was Final Fantasy VIII was like perfectly aligned to what people who played 7 wanted from a Final Fantasy game.
Right.
But then Sakaguchi realized kind of like what had happened. And that's why he split out. So he had Kitase, who clearly represented like the modern era of Final Fantasy, work on 10. And he had Ito, who was more aligned with the older school of Final Fantasy, work on 9. And like you kind of see it, right? You typically have those lists where people like 7, 8, and 10, and people like 6 and 9. Like they kind of like there is that like loose relationship that exists in terms of when people are grouping those games together. And then like he obviously like 12 is kind of seen as like an iteration on 9. Like you have that 6, 9, 12 group, and then you have like 7, 8, and 10 group. And like he realized that there were these different camps evolving, and that you needed to create different games to accommodate for these different camps of fans, because like they weren't just going to go away, and they were valuable valuable assets, right? You know, they were what they were wanting was fine. Like 9 is a really nice evolution of 6 in terms of the concepts. And like we don't know what 12 was going to be. It's probably going to be completely different. But 12 was really there to be for like the tactics. Like tactics brought in a load of new people again, right? And like 12 was going to be a mainline Final Fantasy game for them. You had 11 that was going to be a mainline Final Fantasy game for MMO fans. And like I still don't know what was going to happen in that era. But if you think about like it's one of those butterfly effect moments. Because like at that time they announced 9, 10 and 11 at the exact same time, right? Because they were designed for 3 separate parts of the fan base. It was like it was a purposeful thing. Like here's 3 games, you're probably going to like one of them. If you like all of them, great. But like at least one of these will cater to who you are as a fan. And one of them, which was the MMO, was going to be bringing in a new group of fans, like Tactics had done before. Like they were diversifying. 12 was announced like the year after. For like, you know, like, and then like so that was like that thing. Like they had those kind of like four different work streams essentially. You had like Katase's vision for Final Fantasy. You had Ito's and Matsuno's vision for Final Fantasy. You had the MMO, and then you had like I don't know what Ito would have worked on, but they kind of combined those 2 teams. But then you also had 13 that was being developed in the background as soon as 10 was done, right? Because 13 was supposed to come out in the original plan 2004, 2005.
Jeez.
Like it's crazy to think about, but like imagine like how it would have gone, right? Because you had 10, you had 10.2, fine. 13 was then supposed to be like an iteration really of 10.2. So like those kind of like fans that were liking that more modern system would have got that game that would have been perfectly aligned to what they wanted to see, and it would have come right after 12, like almost like the year after. So you would have had like you've got your MMO, you've got your Katase type experience, you've got your Matsuno Ito type experience, all kind of like cycling around each other, each accommodating for those different fan bases that existed. But obviously Sakaguchi left. Final Fantasy 12 went into development hell. Matsuno quit because it was just too much of a disaster. Like, and he couldn't deal with it, the stress anymore. 12 ended up getting delayed by like 3 years, which then meant that Final Fantasy 13 couldn't release because they couldn't release 13 before 12.
Right.
And then because 12 got delayed so much, the 13 team were like, let's do this tech demo for the 7 remake kind of thing. And then that was so well received, they were like, you know what? Let's just start 13 again. Like, let's build it for the next generation of consoles.
Right.
And then that then took them like 4 or 5 years because they didn't even know how to make an HD game. And they had to learn that on the fly, like completely unprepared. And like, I just think like how different, like imagine how different it would have been if you're in that world where you have Final Fantasy X comes out in 2001, Final Fantasy 11 comes out in 2002, Final Fantasy 12 comes out in 2003, Final Fantasy 13 comes out in, 13.2 was 2004, right? Was that 2003 as well?
I don't really remember. I want to say 2003 though.
Let's check.
I'm pretty sure it's 2003 because I want to say it was like 2 years after. And maybe 2004 in the West. I don't know.
2003, yeah. And then like
okay.
You have like like so Final Fantasy 12 is like 2003, 2004, and then you got Final Fantasy 13, which comes out 2005 or 2006. Like that would have been, and then they would have gone into the new console generation. Like, you think 2006 is when they announced Fabula Nova Crystallis. That wouldn't have happened in the same way, and they wouldn't have had to keep like shelving Versus 13 because Versus 13 again couldn't come out before 13, right?
Right.
Like it was like it just that whole like early period of Square Enix just like it laid such a bad foundation for everything that happened afterwards. And then we've been in like this just weird kind of thing where change has happened in extremes. Because if we'd had that previous environment where those games were all coming out in quick succession, the change would have been happening amongst those kind of pockets, but people would have probably been okay with it, right? Like nine like didn't vibe with me when it first came out because it wasn't really designed for me because I came in with 7. but I still enjoyed it. I still played it. And I could see like the evolutions in there and like the different concepts that were in play. And then like if they'd had that, it would have been really cool. But like the change that was happening, they would have probably had games coming out, you know, relatively quickly still, because they would have had like 4 or 5 different Final Fantasy teams kind of like on like cycling. Like they would have been able to put out a game every 1 to 2 years that would have all been different, that would have catered to different people. But they would have been that natural kind of change and evolution. But instead, we got 12 comes out in 2006, which is very different from like 10, which was the most recent one, which before that, which was 5 years before. And then you had 13 comes out in 2009, which is 4 years after. And then because of everything that's happened with like 14 comes out the year after, that's a disaster, but then gets basically delayed. So then it's like 4 years really between 13 and The Realm Reborn. And then you've got 15, which is another 3 years after that. But you've got like 7 years, no, 6 years, 6 or 7 years between 15 and 13, which is crazy. Like it like
that was such a terrible time.
Yeah, like,
that was such a terrible time.
Whereas now, like I feel as like hopefully, I don't know what's. My fear is that after 16 comes out, like I don't know what's next. Right, with the 7 remake side of things, we know roughly. Right, we've had 7 remake. We know that 7 Rebirth is probably going to come out in a year's time, and then we know that whatever is going to come after is probably going to come out in like 2026 ish. 2027.
Yeah, and it's like who is even gonna develop Final Fantasy 17? Like who
knows?
Because I mean Yoshida's saying that it's not gonna be me, it's not my team, we're not working on it. But then I'm also wondering, I'm like, well then what's happening to the team that worked on 16, right? Like what's happening to all those people?
I mean, like if you think about the ways that it would have gone before, even with 16, right? People were gradually being taken away from 14 without anyone knowing to work on 16.
Right.
They could already be doing that to work on 17.
17 has to already be in development, I feel like, because the way there was this I believe it was a tweet that I saw a few weeks back that really put it in perspective. I want to say Jason Schreier may have put it out, may have been someone else, but basically what they said is that game development cycles have gotten so long that if you start a game project today, it will have to be for PlayStation 6. So basically, all the games that are coming this generation are already in development.
I mean, if 17 doesn't come out to the next console generation, I think that would be a mistake. But like, ultimately, even if that does happen, this console generation, we would have had 16, 7 Rebirth, and 7 whatever the last one's going to be called. There's also like the rumor of another remake coming out. So that would be like, 4 big Final Fantasy games in one console generation. 2, like, most of them will be remakes, but like we already got one major one.
After 9 remake and part 3, I want them to stay away from remakes, because I'd rather, and this is just personal, but I'd rather them focus on 17, 18, and 19 than trying to like rehash certain stuff, or trying to like sell on nostalgia. Because I mean, honestly, the game that like made me feel more nostalgic than any game I had played in a long time was not a remake or a remaster. It was Fantasian. Fantasian brought me back to the PS1 era more than Final Fantasy VII Remake did. I'm not just saying that because of the Arbiters. I'm saying that because
Yoshida spoke about that, right, as well, because he was like, as great as 7 Remake was, it was a remake. It was a remake.
Yeah.
And like, it's not going to be driving people back in. It's not going to make the franchise massively grow. If it does, then it must have done something freaking amazing.
Right.
And
if it does, that's still kind of concerning. Because that means that nothing they do is like, that means that like 7 is basically like their limit. It's all downhill from here. Right. And so It's funny too because everyone's like, well, why hasn't he mentioned the success of Final Fantasy VII Remake in these interviews where he talks about like, because it's Final Fantasy VII. It's not really a new thing that's being created. Like, and that's not to say that Remake hasn't done like a lot of new things that are successful, whether it's the gameplay stuff or the story stuff or the way they represented the characters in a really great way. But it's not like it's not like that's a brand new world. I mean, the systems are brand new, but it's more like an adaptations of previous systems that you already love and enjoy. So basically, all they did was kind of maintain and expand upon that, and that's not bad. I mean, that's kind of like what it's supposed to do, right? Like that's like the apex of like what it's supposed to do, really. But that's not a new Final Fantasy, right? And so people kind of talk about like, why didn't Yoshida mention that? But it's not like that was like, you know, the at the time Final Fantasy 16, 17, etc., right?
And like to his point as well, like it didn't do anything. Like
right.
it sold okay, it reviewed well, but it didn't bring a load of new fans into the franchise. Like it didn't achieve its objective in that way. Like it didn't make Final Fantasy relevant. Again,
right.
It appealed to old school fans. It brought in a small percentage. I don't know what percentage, but like it wasn't huge. 15 brought in probably more people new to the franchise than the 7 remake did. And like, you know, with 16, that's the objective. Bring a load of new people in, and they're treating 16 as Final Fantasy 7 was treated back in the day. Like they want to bring in like if the existing fans like it, fantastic, that's amazing. But like their objective is like we gotta shake things up. We've got to make this a game that everyone wants to play, whether they're like 17 or whether they're 40 or 50 or 60. You know,
yeah, and that's
it's gotta be a must-have game.
Yeah, and that's kind of. I feel like it's been a problem for a long time, and people got mad at Yoshida for saying that there hasn't been like a must-buy Final Fantasy game in a long time, and people were saying, "Oh, well, he's not a real fan." But it's like you are speaking from a consumer standpoint, where you just love all of this stuff, and you've been with Final Fantasy for like 20, 30 years. When
we were kids, right? Maybe it's slightly different for you than it was for me, but like when I was like a kid, Final Fantasy VII came out. Like everyone of my age demographic wanted Final Fantasy VII. Like irrespective, like, you know, like there were people that weren't like who I would consider traditional gamers who were playing Final Fantasy VII. Because it was like the game. Everyone was like, you have to play this.
Yeah,
it will blow your mind. Whereas like now, like if you go into like a high school, like most people, they may know Final Fantasy, but most of them would not, and it definitely would not be compared to like the power of like Fortnite or like PUBG or like League of Legends. Like these are games that are relevant. Like Final Fantasy is not in that. It's not in that space.
Yeah.
And that's obviously the objective.
Right. And I guess put simply, right, in a way I guess that everyone can understand, is that gaming has grown exponentially since Final Fantasy VII released. And Final Fantasy has like shrunk. Like literally. Because there hasn't even been like one title yet that has sold as much as OG FF7. There has not been one.
People mentioned Ring. You've got like Monster Hunter's obviously like managed to just keep growing and keep growing. I think like the new ones on like 15, 20 million copies sold.
Yep. World's at like 20 million.
Sold over 10 million. Yeah, like they've done really well. Like they're games that like loads of people know.
Yeah.
And then you compare that to 7 Remake, and it's like, you know, it sold 5, which is it's decent. But like, you know, it's not like God of War Ragnarok, which has sold like 13 million copies now in like 2 months.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And that's what people gotta understand. You may look at numbers that like 5 million, and you think, wow, that's like amazing. And in a vacuum, maybe it is. But then when you look at how much growth you've had,
Witcher 3,
and then you look at like Witcher 3, and then you look at other AAA role playing games, especially Western ones. you see like this kind of gaping disparity, right? And again, from a fan perspective, it's easy to see it like as a victory, but from an investor perspective and from Square Enix's perspective as a company, you know, you have to understand from like the more capitalist perspective of people who believe that, you know, the concept of infinite growth is a real thing. They look at that and they're like, it's not enough. Even if it keeps the doors open. And in fairness to them, there is something to it, right? Because there is a trend line, and the trend line is suggesting that they're never able to surpass what OG was in terms of popularity and sales and success. And so
15
right.
Somehow, like, because of Tabata's like just evil geniusness, like, you think like he gets so much trash for like the Final Fantasy 15 universe, but you cannot fault that guy's ability to make people care and like absorb everything. Like, no matter how much of a Franken project it was, like, and like I don't know, like, obviously you've read the book that I wrote, Ryan. Small plug there, not that you can buy it right now anyway, but like I don't know if you've read the excerpt in there from Dan Sito, who worked on 15.
Oh no, I don't think
he basically talked about how like Tabata was like he was so willing to experiment, try new things, and like that's why they had like Monsters of the Deep and like 15 mobile games and stuff. And it wasn't like he was trying to be like manipulative or anything. It's just like someone came to him with an idea, they wanted to try something, and he was like, sure, like, see what you can do, kind of thing, right? They tried to make everything work, and they like just they explored things. Like, some of it's a bit skeevy, like Final Fantasy 15 A New Empire, which is now War for Aeos, like and like but like also you think about that, like, for us that is like the devil, right?
Right.
But Final Fantasy 15 A New Empire is one of the most profitable mobile games ever made. Like,
that is so insane, man.
Like you can't. Like, not everything that they did was like a success, but like ultimately, Final Fantasy 15 has sold over 10 million copies. I don't know. It's probably even close to 11 million now. Like, it on its base system, I believe it sold more than 7 did on the PlayStation.
On PS4, yeah. I mean, as for what we know, but we still don't even know really where 7 is at, like, in terms, or remake is at.
Remake.
Yeah. So 7,
like,
we know they actually like hard confirmed recently. It was like 13 or 14 million in like their like 25th anniversary thing. But
whereas like 15's achieved that in 5 years, like 10 to 11 million in 5 years.
Which, but it really does like beg a question though on what the sales are for it too, because like with the 25th anniversary, I was really certain that they were going to like explicitly talk about the sales, because they put out like it was like a PDF thing, and like you scroll through it, and then like I saw the OG sales, I'm like, oh, they're probably gonna talk about remakes, and then they didn't. I was like, why aren't they? So
there have been so many opportunities for them to talk about remake sales, and they've taken none of them, which is weird. Because like all their other franchises, they are like, I mean, they talk about literally, we've sold another 100,000 copies.
Like every time Yoko Taro is like, get me Twitter, I have to post about it right now.
And like Dragon Quest, they're always talking about sales. Like they're usually not shy with it.
This is probably the most shy I've ever seen it with, and it's weird too, because I think it is a significantly better game than 15. Like, a significantly better game. I feel like it's a game that I can recommend with confidence for the most part, aside from the story stuff. But the game.
We don't want to take you back there. Right?
No. I'm just saying that like the story. I mean, that's fair. I think that most people would know that, whether you love that aspect of it or not, that you have to layer. You do have to do like a little bit of research to appreciate like what that title is, but like but it just does like kind of like beg the question on like I mean I think a lot too about like the sequels and what the sequels are gonna do. Like
someone just said that they that the remake's gonna blow up when Rebirth comes out. It's like that didn't happen with the 13 franchise.
Right. And it's hard to imagine maybe like what that like how that's going to work out, because it has happened with some franchises, right? It has happened with like The Witcher 3 and Mass Effect and a lot of other.
But that only works if Rebirth sells more than the first game.
Right. But
right,
then
that's when you're going to see
that's the question.
You're going to see their clout.
Right. But then there's also like the question too of like how do you get the second one to sell more than the first one?
It's like the thing that they've never been able to figure out.
Yeah.
They have never achieved it. Other franchises had. We were talking about Assassin's Creed and how basically like every Assassin's Creed 2 sold more than Assassin's Creed 1. Assassin's Creed 3 sold more than Assassin's Creed 2. Assassin's Creed 4 sold more than 3. And then like Valhalla is on like, I don't know, God knows how many sales now. I think it's 20 million or something. Like,
and in Final Fantasy, even the numbered ones, they haven't been able to be like, you know, 7's like 13 million, and 8's like this, and then 9's like this, and then 10's back up here, but then, you know, 12 is like down here, and then 13's like a little bit above 12, and then, you know, like it's been like that for even the mainline games. It's been, you know,
all over the place, all over the place.
Yeah. So
going back to your original question of like what I want to see, like I hope that like we have like it's now kind of decided. Katase and his team are working on like the 7 remake style of game, and you have Yoshida and his team who will be working on their style of Final Fantasy game. And like if 16 does well, I feel as though that's like what's going to happen. And I really do genuinely hope that one of them within their business division is already working on 17.
Yeah,
and like if it's Katase's team, fine. If it's Yoshida's team, fine. But like I feel as though that's kind of what would make sense to happen. And there's people like within those areas that we don't know what they're doing, right? No one would have expected Takai to be the director of 16.
Yeah, no one would have called that
at all.
Yeah,
and like, you know, we talked about this tons. Like everyone's like, oh, Yoshida's going to direct it. Yoshida's going to direct it, and it's like, and he was like, I'm not directing it. It's like. But he never said he wasn't going to be involved. He didn't say wasn't going to be producing the game. Like he played those people.
Yeah, because he like weeks before it was announced, he's like, I think it's so annoying. Like you like explicitly said, it's so annoying that people think I'm directing Final Fantasy 16.
Just like
and the whole time he's like, I didn't say anything about producing.
But yeah, like I think that's what I want to see. Like, I want to see like kind of the end of this kind of like extreme evolutions. Like, I'm perfectly okay with evolutions as long as they build on the concepts that are already laid down. And like, but yeah, like 7 remake and 16 are going to be very different games. I don't know how much commonality there's going to be between them, like in terms of like how their mechanics work. And like, yeah, you've got like Ito obviously was like the main guy in terms of battle systems back in the day, and then like 10 was the first game where he wasn't in there, and like it was Tsuchida who came from the Front Mission franchise, and like he obviously went to a conditional turn-based battle system, and then Ito did 12, and then Tsuchida did 13. And like 10-2 was done by one of Tsuchida's disciples. So like there's like that kind of like evolution there, and then but Tsuchida obviously left after 13 because he was so angry. But like now, like they've got like they poached 2 really important people from Capcom, right? They've got Monster Hunter's like battle director working on 7 remake. And they've got Devil May Cry and Dragon's Dogma's battle director working on 16. Like if those 2 guys are not going to just be put to waste,
right?
And I can't see like Suzuki going to work on 14. for example.
That would be a waste. Like making him like,
Yeah.
and that's not to say that like that he probably wouldn't be like a great raid designer, but it's just like that's just like not putting his skill set to use. And then also too, like I think that like I mean maybe he would move on after that, but then I think that would also be a mistake too because they desperately need to pay someone like Suzuki whatever he wants and give him whatever kind of like work-life balance he wants. Because,
and like if they did have someone, because I remember with when people were kind of looking through it, and I was one of those people looking through the credits of like Heaven's Ward and Stormblood and Shadowbringers, and I believe there was like one other like senior person who disappeared at the same time as Takai and My Hero from Heaven's Ward, but then they came back for Endwalker.
Oh wow!
And like because people thought they were involved too. I can't remember who it was. But there's bound to be people that are working on 16. On 14. That because I mean, like the credits to those games are so ridiculously long.
Mm-hmm.
I know on Reddit there's like a Excel spreadsheet that someone's putting together of like mapping all the staff members and how all the roles have like grown over time and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like like it wouldn't surprise me if there are already people in that team who are like we all know, like everyone talks about the writers of Shadowbringers and Endwalker about how amazing they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, My Hero's been given the chance to work on a mainline Final Fantasy game. Like I'm sure they're like bursting at the seams to work on a mainline Final Fantasy game as well. And like they inherited 14 from My Hero, so there's probably tons of writers that they're like tutoring right now that can take 14 over. Like especially because it's supposed to be going into its new era, right?
Oh, I think it's already happening because Natsuko Ishikawa, I forget the name of the person that she's mentoring right now, but he's supposed to take over for 7.0, and she's gonna be his supervisor basically. And so,
what else did that happen with? Koji Fox, right? Koji Fox. Has stepped away from. He's still involved with 14 as a supervisor, and there's a new localization director. I can't remember her name, but like he's basically handed over. He's still there, kind of making sure that they're consistent with stuff. But it's pretty much her game now, and like she's in all the active time report. The letter to its producers live, right? She's like the person who's taken his role. In that like front facing role in that team.
Yeah. And so I can only imagine with My Hero and the promotion, I mean, massive promotion that he got from how well Heavensward's story was received. You know, for Ishikawa to come and do Shadowbringers and Endwalker, which are like two probably like, I mean, a lot of people will go as far as to say like some of the best Final Fantasy stories ever. So if so for her to get that type of reception, I don't know if you've seen like the clip from her at PAX where they just introduced, or she just like walked up to the microphone and explained that like, hello, I'm like the lead scenario writer for Shadowbringers, and everyone just stands up and starts clapping and ovating for like a full like minute or two and she can't even speak. So that and like the huge waves of people that it ushered into the game too.
Also, like once 16's done, I'm pretty sure that a lot of that team could probably be recycled back into 14. Right. They're like Takai could probably just kind of slot back into like the role he had, and like Minagawa could probably just go back they can probably go back into roles within that team while like another team kind of substitutes out. Like they could. Like Yoshida's got like so much power now and flexibility with regards to what he does and how he manages all those assets, because he has got a massive mega team, right? This mega team. And like 14, having all these people kind of move out of it hasn't diminished its quality at all.
For sure.
Right?
No, and in fact, you could almost say that like when they rotated, the quality kind of escalated, which is really funny, right? Because I don't know too many games. I mean, there was like a rough period during Stormblood, but like right after Stormblood, they immediately like shot back off with Shadowbringers and Endwalker, and so it's just like the game didn't really dip off at all, and in fact it only really got better as they kind of rotated their staff up, which is
they're laying down the gauntlet. Like
Yeah.
they are like against CBU1, they are just saying like, what you got? Like
Yeah, for sure,
Like-
for sure. And that's that's kind of like one of the issues you kind of have like you know, kind of like team structure stuff in CBU1, where I feel like the senior roles have been filled by like a lot of the same guys for like a little too long. And I don't feel like there's been like enough. I mean, they're starting to have it like it happened a little bit with like Hamaguchi coming up, but like
that structure is CBU1. The structure is super weird. Like I struggle to kind of understand because even in like and this is one of those ones where I'm going to be that guy. That quote that Yoshida said about Kitase, like giving him permission to kind of do whatever the hell he wants. Like I kind of see that as a bit of a problem in some regard. It's great for Yoshida, but like could you imagine like maybe it did happen, but like Sakaguchi just being like, yeah, I don't really care too much about what you do. Just kind of do something fun, you know, whatever, you know. Like, like I remember like when I was doing the Rise and Fall of Evilise video, there was an interview that was done with Shigeru Miyamoto and Yasumi Matsuno.
wow.
And Miyamoto basically said like, and you can see it like to a T with Yoshida, right? And when I say this, you're just going to be like, boom, light bulb moment. This makes complete sense. Because Matsuno was talking about how he struggled to be a producer, right? He wasn't the director, he was the producer. But in a hierarchy, the producer sits above the director in video game development for that purposes. And like the director's job is to fulfill what the producer wants to see, right? So Miyamoto was typically the person who was going like, I've got this idea for a game, I'm going to assign it to you to make that game. And that's where Matsuno ended up in like Tactics Advance, where he wasn't the director, he was the producer, and he really struggled with it because he was used to making all those decisions and doing exactly what he wanted. And he struggled like telling this director, no, like you're not doing this how I wanted. Can you fix it, please? Like that kind of thing. And Miyamoto basically said like I was at a point where like he was like good cop bad cop, right? He wasn't there to be anyone's friend. He basically said like, I have a game that I want made, you will make it the way I want, or you're basically getting fired, is kind of what he said. He was just like, that's how like explicit I am about stuff. If you do not make the game I want in the way I want, you will make it again until it is good enough for what I want it to be. And like if you think about Nintendo, like that's how like they have that massive bar of quality, because they do like Miyamoto will not accept anything other than exactly what he wanted to see. And like if you've ever been in a management position, you kind of like that, right? When you delegate stuff to your staff, you have a vision for what it is you want them to do. If they exceed you, like some people will exceed your vision, and that's amazing.
Right.
But when you have people coming back and it's just like, that's not really what I asked for.
Right.
You know? Like
and it's why Steve Jobs probably for you know,
he was like just anal on the detail.
Right.
Like I can't see Kitase as that person. Like when you talk about him in the interviews, it's kind of like more of a discussion. You know, like I don't necessarily know if who's the visionary, right? Who is it? Is it Nomura? Is it Hamaguchi? Is it Toriyama? Is it Nojima? Is it Kitase? Like, which one of those is actually deciding? Here's what this project actually is.
Yeah.
Whereas like, if you look at CBU 3, like Yoshida as the producer of this game, I'm pretty confident that Final Fantasy 16 is his vision. Takai is there to make that vision a reality.
Right. And he's discussed as much too. He's like, you know, I told Takai this is exactly what I wanted. I wanted epic icon fights where you're transforming into any, you know, kind of describe the concept of the game, and then he shipped that off to Takai and kind of gave it to him. So yeah, I mean it is really interesting.
That structure of that business unit,
right?
I don't understand. Like,
right. So I mean, like even when like you talk about like Remake, for example, and like sort of the differences between like, well, who wanted like the arbiters and like the remake sequel idea, and some people will be like, oh, it's Nojima, or oh, it's Kitase, or oh, it was Nomura, or something like that. And then people will frequently pull up the quote where Kitase was basically like, originally I envisioned something much different, but then Nomura and Toriyama, they were like, oh, well, we wanted to do something that was closer to the original game. And even then, I'm kind of like, so the director and the producer had fundamentally different visions.
But if you think about how it used to be, right? When Kitase was making like the games that he's obviously like incredibly famous for, he was the director. So he was having these conversations with people like Nomura and Nojima as the director.
Right.
Whereas Sakaguchi was the producer.
Right.
Like he was the one who was ultimately responsible for the product they put out, and would be giving like the final sign off to be like, yeah, this is where we need it to be, guys. I don't feel as though Guitar's ever really transitioned into the producer role as effectively like being that ultimate like decision maker. Because like, if you think about the original 7, where the Guitar's was like, oh, I wanted to kill off the old cast before the end of the game, and Nomura was like, yeah, maybe you don't want to do that. Like, kind of thing. Like, it's the same conversations now 20 years on, right, with the 7 remake. Like Guitar's wants to do all these extreme things with the remake. And you've got people like Nomura who, I feel as though he kind of gets a bad rap in it, because he's probably more like he's the one that's a bit more reserved, being like, maybe we don't want to do that, right. Like just yet. But they all just seem to kind of go with the flow. Like he said, like Hamaguchi was recommended they have Sephiroth at the end of the game. It wasn't their original plan at all.
Yeah,
but Hamaguchi suggested it, and Nomura was like, he made a good enough case. Yeah, put it in. Why not?
Right. Which, I mean, and that's kind of the thing too, is that like it's kind of weird for me that like you can just kind of like, I don't know, make that suggestion, and then they'll like, okay, well, this fundamentally alters the entire story of the trilogy, but let's just Nomura
should be a producer. Like he doesn't want to be a director. He's been open about that, right? He said he much prefers being a producer. But he also is like, he's so spread thin, he doesn't really have the time to like actually focus on being a producer. He's the creative producer, which is like that extra step removed.
Right. They come milk him for ideas when they need them, right? But
he's had some real bad ideas over the years. But he's had some good ones too, right? But that's like the when you're the ideas person, not all of your ideas are going to pan out amazingly well.
Right.
But he was even coming up with game concepts like in like 96, 97. Like there's a game called Dynami Tracer, which is like a Japanese exclusive racing RPG. If you haven't seen it, you got to look it up. There's a Tonbri as one of the playable characters, and it uses the Chrono Trigger engine.
What the hell?
It's like the weirdest game. But he was like, he would come up with these ideas, and like people would just be like, yeah, like sure, let's try it out, whatever, like, yeah, not everything's gonna work. And like All the Bravest was his idea, for example. Like clearly not a winner.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is
remember
too,
as well, but Kingdom Hearts wasn't Nomura's idea as well, right? It was Sakaguchi's idea, Sakaguchi and Hamaguchi's idea. He was the one that was just like, I'll do it. I'll make this thing.
Right. And that game,
which is that producer-director dynamic again, right?
Sakaguchi produced the first game too, right? Yeah. So and that also kind of shows like too, like when you think about like the direction of the first Kingdom Hearts and the direction of like the subsequent games that came after too, and why it differs in such like an incredibly jarring way. Because I mean, like if you go and play like Kingdom Hearts 3 or 3D or Birth by Sleep, and then you go back to like the source material, and it's like, man, there's a very distinct kind of branching off. So let's get to some of these audience questions here.
Sorry, I'll segue there for a
minute. No. I mean, that's deep conversation. We could like we could have
People
like
are
a
gonna be
whole
people are gonna
discussion.
be like quoting me on socials now to be like, Darryl said all this. He's coming for these producers and creators. No. Come on.
Yeah. Well,
Credit where credit's due.
yeah.
Like I appreciate all of the different creators we've had over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I do too, right? Like, even like people will say stuff about Nomura, but I think, for Nomura, like, as many games as he's made and as many creative endeavors as he's done, which is probably more than most human beings on Earth. I mean, even most creatives don't do as much creative work as he does, and so. Of course, there's an extremely high number of ideas that he has that are bad, but there's also extremely high number of ideas that he has that are good. That's just because there's a lot of ideas that they get out of him.
Yeah. I mean, even think about it, all of us in our daily lives, right? We all have like ideas and things, but like how many... We don't have like a 100% success ratio on everything we try and do in our lives.
Right.
Like,
Exactly, right? And I'm sure that if Yoshida or anyone else were having to make, nearly as many decisions on as much stuff as Nomura does, then they probably would all, face a lot of the same criticism that he does. So, yeah, I mean,
on that note as well, I think like Nomura is also he's had to. It's kind of like Tabata as well, right? Those two were generally scapegoats.
Yeah, that's like, another thing too, right? Because
I remember when I was doing some the more research I do, the more of a Nomura sympathizer I seem to have become.
Yeah.
Because even with the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, there's this quote I found of Nomura basically saying that when they came up with the idea to do this compilation, him and Kitase were kind of in it together at the beginning because that's what Yuichi Wada wanted to see from them. You've got a new boss coming in, and he's like, guys, we need to make polymorphic content. Let's do it. And you're gonna try your best, right? You wanna try and impress your new boss. And so they were like, yeah, we can do Final Fantasy VII related stuff. It's going to be great. And 2 obviously came out. They were like, yeah, let's do the movie. And then I think it's I can't remember the exact wording, but basically Nomura said okay, I was fine with the movie. But then Kitase came to me and said, oh yeah, by the way, we're also making a mobile game. Can you figure that out? Please.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, we're also making a third person shooter game. Can you figure that one out too?
Right.
And oh yeah, we're making a PSP game. And can you just I mean, him and Tabata were kind of oh yeah, sure, we can we'll make it work. We'll try our best. And it always makes me laugh that there were all those people that were trying to pit Tabata and Nomura against each other, especially when the whole he took over as director and he stabbed him in the back, they must hate each other. It's they were in the trenches together their entire careers at Square. They were probably really close. They worked together on so many games.
Yeah, in fact, that's a big part of why he kind of entrusted 15 to Tabata, from my understanding,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, because Tabata had dug him out of so many holes before, Type 0, Crisis Core. Tabata worked on a Kingdom Hearts game as well, I think, and the Third Birthday as well. All Nomura projects that Tabata just handled, just got on with it, and he became super dependable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean that makes perfect sense to me, with how that sort of lineage got passed down. And it's unfortunate because 15's team and Tabby no longer there for us to see anything else from them.
Yeah, poor Luminous.
Rip. So some of these questions, okay, did you see Towns? Someone asked.
Yes.
Oh.
I mean, technically, you've all seen Towns too.
Right.
Right. They have shown off a 2-second clip of Clive running through a market.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure they've shown off clips of Clive riding his chocobo.
Yeah, that much. Yeah. We've seen pictures of Towns, but I guess like 13 trauma, people are like, will we actually get to go into them? Is like
I didn't see too much more, but I did see towns, and I've been told that they will be interactive.
Okay, that's
stuff.
Good. So, Subtext asks, in the menu screenshots, I noticed there that it lists 2 out of 4 potions. Are there caps on how many you can hold at once, almost like a Soulsborne game?
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe so.
Okay. The sequence of Clive climbing the mountain during the Garuda storm actually gives Major 14 dungeon vibe. Oh, wait, that's not actually a question. I thought it was kind of like wrote like it was starting one. Darryl, how do you feel about the HUD and UI? Is it customizable in the accessibility menu? Can you turn it off completely?
Yeah, that's what I tell you. The problem with the wording here, accessibility, has 2 meanings in this game.
Mm-hmm.
I probably should have done. I did look around some of the different menus, like that stuff, but I didn't explore those options, so I don't know is the answer. In terms of my general feel about the HUD, I kind of like it, right? I like the font choices. I like what they've done, and like the design decisions are very purposeful. Like if you're fighting smaller enemies, they have health bars above their heads. As soon as you go to the Benedicta fight, she gets her own customizable health bar at the top. Like it's a very clear distinction between the encounter types, and I kind of like that. Instead of like because they could have easily put her health bar above her head as well. They've chosen not to for a specific reason. Yeah. I'm not bothered by the text stuff coming up on the screen or the damage numbers, because I like a typical Final Fantasy game, right? You want to see the output of what you're doing.
Right.
I don't know many people that are like playing Final Fantasy VII. They're like, oh, I really wish it didn't show the damage numbers.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
It's an RPG, and like it's got its roots in that, and like I'm happy with that. I think some people with the words coming up on the side of the screen saying like, oh, you've done this, you've done that. I can kind of understand that a little bit.
Yeah, that one kind of gets on my nerves a little bit.
And maybe it's just because of the way I am. I didn't really pay too much attention to it, if I was honest. And if anything, I kind of liked it in the same way that I like seeing the numbers, because it was kind of validation of what I'd done. It was like the game kind of rewarding me to say, oh yeah, you did do a precision dodge.
Right.
Like instead of like the visual kind of cue, it was nice to kind of see like what you set out to do actually happened.
Right. I just want to say,
obviously that's going to play a much bigger part in the arcade scene.
Real quick, Paolo, thank you so much for the 10 gift subs. Very generous donation. We appreciate you so much.
The only thing I didn't like about the HUD was like the health bar of Clive. I think like the coloring is just a little bit off. I don't know. Like
it's very neon, right?
Yeah.
I don't mind it as much because it allows you to like kind of like pay attention like a little bit more. Well, maybe not in your case, huh? But like it does like allow you to.
Oh, you're most welcome, Paolo.
Yeah. Obviously, no spoilers. But during your playtime, did you feel like you got a good sense of who Clive is as a person? I feel like they're purposely trying to keep him somewhat of an enigma.
I'd say I mean, I didn't see too much more story than you guys would have seen. But I feel as though what we saw was kind of enough. But also like through the gameplay too. Like one of my favorite things is when like Clive uses one of Titan's abilities, and like he's got a big fist like flying through the air, and he's just going.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I wonder if that'll get annoying though, like 100 times over. I don't know, but I loved it every time that he did it.
Yeah,
like I was like, yeah, I
think it's just like because like Ben Starr, who's the actor, like it's just such a like a guttural performance.
Yeah, and
like like they're like it just seems like all the actors have kind of gone through that as well. Like just like the acting just feels so real. Like just so like guttural. But yeah, like in terms of Clive, like I feel like we talked about a bit before. I feel as though they're being smart in terms of like helping him develop by helping the other characters develop, letting the other characters develop too. Like I feel as though you'll see his development by his relationship with other people. Because I feel as though like there's some people that there's probably gonna be people that die, and that's gonna affect him and how it affects him, and like I don't know if it's been. I think some people have said that it's like been explicitly said in interviews, but like when I was playing through the Ifrit fight, now I'm gonna say that like that was probably the one part of the demo where I was kind of like I'm not necessarily vibing with the gameplay here, and the main reason for that is that like compared to your normal gameplay, we've got tons of stuff going on. Like you get taken control of Ifrit, and you have like 3 things you can do. You can fire a projectile, you can punch something, or you can lunge forward. And like I put down in my notes, it was that fight is like rock paper scissors.
Yeah.
So like and I liked in some aspects. So like it's you don't really, again, these are things you won't pick up in the demo footage unless you're paying attention. You know what to look for. The projectile, so Garuda basically has the same-ish move set as Titan. Got a couple more special moves that are a bit more crazy. But like when Garuda does a projectile attack,
you mean
if you do a projectile attack?
You said Titan.
No, Garuda.
Yeah, you said Garuda has the same moveset as Titan. I think
sorry.
Just so that no one like takes that and be like,
sorry.
I just wanted to make sure that's clear. Yeah.
So yeah, when Garuda does a projectile attack and you're Ifrit and you do a projectile attack, they cancel each other out. So it's like, and at one point in the fight, it was like I was playing Street Fighter 2, and it was Ryu versus Ken. And like we were both doing fireballs at each other, and they were just hitting each other in the middle, and no one was progressing anywhere.
Right.
And so like that, like obviously the gameplay they showed was not going to show that off because it's not too sexy. But like that's something that can happen, and like Ifrit also walks incredibly slow.
Yeah, that's one thing. And I'm like, if they just increase his move speed by like 1.25%, not percent, but times. And if they just did that, I feel like that would just be like just enough to make it feel. Because
it kind of annoyed me a little bit because the lunge attack, like if you miss that, if you're just a bit too far away, if it just kind of lurches forward and he just goes like, oh, I've missed, and then just kind of like lurches forward, and then you gotta wait for him to reset. But like one of the things they didn't do in the demo is that you can actually dodge forward through Garuda's attacks, so you can close a distance quicker that way. It's a little bit faster. But that's only obviously like the beginning of the fight. What I really liked about the fight was that it had such a narrative connotation, and like someone who's read the interviews, and I don't know if you've seen this, Ryan, as well, please feel free to chime in here. But like when I was playing it, I've seen so much discourse around the QTEs, and like I mean this is one of those things where like all the people complaining about QTEs have not played the game.
Yeah.
I have played the game, and like the QTEs, you get a couple during the dungeon sequence. There's like 2 in the fight against Benedicta. One where like you evade, where she's like throwing a castle at you, and like, and then there's one in with the minions where they like dive, and then you do like a counter. Like they're cinematic sequences that basically help you to take a bit of a breather from the combat, but they're keeping you involved with the action, right? And they're really easy. They're not like they're trying to make you fail. Like the window for doing it is so long. Like if you miss that, I don't even know like what would happen if you did miss it, because like I don't know, like it's you have like 4 seconds to hit the QTE.
Yeah.
But like in the Ifrit fight, completely different types of QTEs. And like and this is where it gets really cool, interesting, and like and why it's quite cool that the icon fights are all going to be so different. They're all going to be, from my understanding, and this is not like an official source or anything, I didn't get told this. My understanding is that the icon fights will be representative of Clive going through his like transformation. So like this first fight against Garuda, it's like one of the, or if not the first time that like, I mean, you can kind of see it from Sid's reaction, right? It's like completely unexpected. Like no one even knew that like if this was possible.
Yeah.
And like so Clive is like the controls are stripped back because Clive has no idea what he's doing as Ifrit. right? If you think about it from like a narrative perspective, like it makes sense. And then as the fight goes through, Clive is losing control of his abilities, and like so the QTEs are coming in, and like the best way I can describe it, like, is if you've played Metal Gear Solid 4, the ending towards the end of the game, there's a sequence where Snake is basically crawling through a tunnel, and it's like basically an elongated QTE. And I remember David Jaffe actually talking about it many years ago, because he was basically saying like games can't invoke emotion, like they're not the same as movies and stuff. But he played that sequence and he finally like got it. It was like that moment where like you're basically just crawling, but you're dying while you're crawling, and there's like nothing you can do about it. But you feel like you feel in that moment, right? Because you're like you're trying to mash the things like make him go faster, and like in this battle with Garuda again, like you're just watching, so it's not the same. You didn't experience it. But when you're actually playing through it, you feel like control kind of being taken away from you. Like basically the second half of the fight is just kind of elongated QTEs and stuff of varying different forms, and like they go from like being like, you know, softer, calmer QTEs through to being like, you know, button mashing as hard as you can, where like Clive's basically just lost it and he's just like going feral. And like, so from a narrative perspective, like it made complete sense to me. Like whether or not that's going to resonate with everyone, I don't know. But like, you know, just thinking about it in that sense, like these QTs are there because Clive has lost control. You've lost control of the character. Like you don't have the same motor skills anymore, so you can't be like explicitly saying I want to cast a fire spell right now, because Clive can't. He doesn't have like the brain power to be like he's just like, you know, ripping his like chest over. He's turning himself into a fireball, like
like yeah, that's so cool, man. Wow. Like from that perspective, it like really, you know, sheds a different light on the QTEs, which, you know, I have to say, like personally, I just really don't get why people like freak out about I don't get why people like freak out and dislike QTEs that much anyway. They're just really, and in some games they can be like stupidly punishing, but for the most part, I just see it like, maybe this is the hot take, I don't know. Action games are already rhythm games, right? So all the QTE is just an extension of the rhythm game.
Then you've got Hi-Rise Hi-Fi Rush, which is basically just like
which is like literally that, right? So I mean, people talk about like people always talk about QTEs as like they're just like inherently bad like action game design. I'm like, no, they're not. They're just part of like the natural rhythm game that like is like that an action game already is.
If they're done well, it's a good mechanic. Like I still remember, like Shenmue was one of the first games to have QTEs. I liked them. Like they added to the tension. But it's like that MGS4 example. Like if you're just watching a gameplay video of Snake crawling through the thing at a snail's pace, you don't have that like you can't feel how it feels, because you're not there like mashing the controller, like trying to get him to move faster. You're just watching a very slow sequence.
It's also really satisfying.
The gaming comes in. Yeah, it's where the game comes in, because you get that extra level of interactivity. You're in control, or not in control, as the case may be.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Okay, we'll take this last question before we go. Do you think Clive will die at the end of the game due to the physical toll of him absorbing the power of the icons?
I don't know. I mean, they've kind of shown it in some of the trailers, right? I mean, in one of the trailers, I think they uncover like a dead dominant. Is that, if I'm correct?
Wait, the guy that's like in bed next to like Hugo, or like not in bed next to him, but like Hugo's like standing, like, yeah.
But I feel it's like, in one of the trailers, like it was the one where they were going through the book, like the the Ambition trailer, I think it was.
Oh, well then I don't know, because I think the guy that Hugo was mourning when he died, I think he was a bear. I don't think he was a dominant. Because you also have to remember too that the bearers basically suffer the same fate as the dominants. Basically, anyone who can channel ether like that, eventually they end up.
And yeah, like there's the whole thing about like, you know, and I feel as though like Dion, for example, is like he's gone. Like,
yeah, he looks like a guy who dies in a Final Fantasy game. I don't know how else to say.
but like the way they've worded the lore as well, like the fact that like, you know, he basically like you can see it, like he's actively against his father's actions, right? Because he knows that he's gonna have to sacrifice his life. Because he's gonna have to turn into Bahamut, and like it's gonna like make like he's gonna eat eat away his life force every single time he has to like fight in one of his father's wars. And like his dad doesn't care that he's dying for the war, essentially. So like I mean, it could be one of those things where like they all die.
Yeah. I wouldn't be too surprised, yeah.
Or like, you know, Clive, you know, there's also the possibility that Clive is different. Right, because he seems to be like an anomaly in the sense that like he's Ifrit, like no one knew that,
right? And also it's just very heavily teased that Clive is not a dominant, like not in that sense. He's something. He's something else. He's something else. And even in that scene where Benedicta is like, "What are you?" She's sensing something in him that is more than human, but not a dominant.
Yeah, because like he should not be able to stand up to her, but he can, and like she just can't. She can't get her head around it.
Right. Which kind of implies that there is something going on with him. So, yeah, I don't know if Clive will die. I feel like it kind of runs a risk of almost being cliche because we just had Noctis die at the end too. I don't.
Okay, they did a happy ending.
Right, they retconned. But like I don't know, man. Like I don't want them to. I just want it to not be cliche. I feel like if him dying is like super appropriate for the story and the only way it can go, then sure. But I also kind of think too that it might be kind of interesting if he didn't die, because I mean, like, you know, but also feel like as much trouble as he's caused the entirety of Valistia, you know, destroying the mother crystals, basically resetting the power balance in the whole world, I almost kind of wonder how the hell does he live like normally after that, right?
Yeah,
there's almost no way for him to live.
It's kind of a fair point there about, you know, protagonists do often die. I mean, like Cloud basically comes back from the dead like 50 times. Like,
yeah,
Squall is dead.
Yeah,
right. Squall is dead. Zidane is a genome with a lifespan potentially. We don't know.
Right.
Like, Titus then just gets spirits away.
Right. It's kind of
lightning doesn't.
Right. Exactly. So it's kind of a trope, and I don't know. I think it'd be fun to not do that this time, but there will have to be some kind of crazy, you know, consequence for Clive. That is pretty extreme.
My only hope is that it's a story like that. I feel as though like some Final Fantasy games have done this. I feel like 10 like really like punched me in the gut. And like really made me think about it. But like, you know, like when you watch like certain films where after the film, like for me it always happens with like Chris Nolan films. Like the film ends and you're just like, what did I like? What like it takes you like up? It kind of like takes you that moment to be like, I need to like actually digest.
Yeah,
what has happened.
Yeah.
Like I just really hope that they do that, because like I feel as though a lot of Final Fantasy games are like they're really good stories, but like, you know, 7, it's like a nice conclusion, you know, like an 8, it's a nice conclusion, you know, like they kind of wrap things up really nicely and everything. Like 10's the one where it ends and you just kind of like, I did not expect that to happen. Okay, like, you know, and then you get that again, and then you like get all this extra context and layers and stuff, and like, yeah, like I really hope that like 16 has that kind of end to it where afterwards you just like you can't get it out of your head. Like it was that good.
Yeah.
You just wanna talk to people about it. You just wanna interact with people. Like 7 Remake kind of did that to a degree because of how like crazy it was, and you just wanted to like get other people's opinions of it. Like you wanted to see if other people interpreted it the same way that you did.
Right.
And obviously you went through that in one side of the camp.
Yeah, I did.
But like, you know, I don't know, like a film like Interstellar is one of those films where like some people hate it, but for some people it's like, you know, this really profound thing that just kind of like once the film is over, it's not over. You know, like it's still kind of there. It kind of sticks with you,
right?
And like the feelings that you felt as you watched it and you went through just kind of linger. You can still like, I mean, I'm in the like Interstellar camp, but like even now I can like think back to that film and like it evokes emotions, and like I really hope that 16 is a game that like does that in a good way. Like when it finishes, you're just like, that was a damn good game, you know, like?
Yeah, and it's hard for me to like readily recall too many games. I think like the last time I had that experience actually was with the Final Fantasy. It was particularly like with Shadowbringers, and I think it was after I caught up on like 5.3, and that was pretty much all that was out at the time. And I mean 5.3's ending is like, I'm not spoiling it for anybody, but 5.3's ending is like insane. Like the way it kind of brings like the whole of Final Fantasy together in like one epic boss fight. It was almost like, dude, if Final Fantasy ended and this was the last boss fight for all of Final Fantasy, I would be okay with it. Like this could end like the whole franchise, because that's how good that final boss for 5.3 was, and how just the references that it made to like Final Fantasy 1 and Final Fantasy 3 and 4, and then also in the references that it made to 14 itself, and the way it felt almost like the whole franchise like came to like a full circle moment. Whereas in Sakaguchi, I think you know the fight I'm talking about, right?
I'm not 100% sure. I mean, we did just do the evolution of final bosses in 14 specifically. So like,
it's called the Seat of Sacrifice, because I don't want to spoil the actual boss. If you remember that one,
I can't remember if we did that one actually.
Yeah, I think you did, because it covered like the 0.3 bosses.
Yeah,
and there was the 0.3 boss for Shadowbringers.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The guy that everyone always talks about.
Yeah. Sakaguchi, he's a very big fan of that one. He still tweets about that fight sometimes, where he's just like, when he gets it in a roulette, he's still like, this, you know, this like makes me like cry like every time. So, which I mean, I as much as that fight meant for fans, I couldn't even imagine how much that fight probably meant for him going into it and having that perspective. There's a lot of stuff in that game where I think, like, you know, Sakaguchi is having a playthrough of that game that is like this massive tribute to him by this guy that, according to Twitter, hates Final Fantasy.
I mean, yeah,
it's just really
in that
special.
Regard, like,
yeah,
it's super interesting that like Yoshida has. I mean, it must be a conscious decision. Yoshida has like chosen like not to really like foster and take advantage of Sakaguchi, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because
like,
he could.
Remember when they did like, yeah, because like when they did 15, they rolled Sakaguchi out and like, you know, uncovered he was there, being like, yeah, you know, like there was interviews with him and Tabata together talking about stuff, and like they really kind of like they tried to build up that relationship, and basically give the game Sakaguchi's seal of approval. Whereas like with 14, Sakaguchi's done all of it off his own bat. Like Yoshida hasn't been there like, oh, can you put in a good word for us, please?
Yeah. Please go out
But,
there
like-
and tell the
but,
Final
like-
Fantasy fans that we're gonna make
But like,
this one good.
yeah, but like based on how much Sakaguchi loves 14, you'd think that like getting Sakaguchi in some way involved with 16's promotional activities would like really like sink it in.
Right. And
But they've chosen not to do it.
maybe, I mean, and we do have 3 months to go, and this is only the very start of like, the marketing campaign.
Give it time.
So maybe it will. I think that it would be a bad choice on Yoshida's end to not leverage it, especially when Sakaguchi has been singing, Yoshida's and 14's praises on his own without him having to ask for it in like a corporate email NDA type situation. So that's just been him doing that on Twitter because he really likes the game. And if you scroll Sakaguchi's Twitter, it's literally all he talks about.
He was even talking about it at the conference he was just at, right? In Magic in Monaco. He did the whole thing about like Sakaguchi, his fashion brand, and
Sakaguchi. To be clear. I love that, man. I really do. He's still such a great charismatic figure, man. He's really cool, and I don't know. I hope he returns to work on a Final Fantasy game. There's rumors out there say that he's working on 9 remake. I don't know.
They just need to get him to take over Tokyo RPG Factory.
That would be like marketing wise, that would actually probably be really good. Or honestly, if Square Enix just even funded
bought Mistwalker.
Yeah, and I don't even think they have to even buy them, right? Like if they could just be like, hey, Mistwalker, we're just gonna give you money to make a title, and we're gonna put both our names on it, and we're gonna say Sakaguchi's working with Square again, and that's gonna be the headline for marketing the title.
Bring Uematsu back on a mainline soundtrack,
it's
we should be in the company. We've got it all figured out.
Board members right here, you guys. we're about to run Square. Everything's about to be okay. I'm gonna get in there. Yoko Taro will make Nier 3 now instead of milking Automata.
Yeah, like you should have done already, right?
Yeah,
what the hell's going on with Nier? I feel as though, in a weird way, and I know that we're elongating this massively. Sorry, Ryan.
No, you're good. We'll close things out with this. And, yeah.
With Nier, it's got to the point where, if they announced, because that game is done so well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when he announces the next game. No matter what he does now, everyone's just going to be like, sign me up.
Yeah.
Sign me up. Whatever Nier anything they announce with the word Nier associated to it, if it's a video game that is made by Platinum, then they'll just be like, yep.
Yeah, I'm in.
But when you think about the money side of things, right? If when we're the sequel's selling more, if there's any game in Square's arsenal that I believe would be able to sell more than its predecessor right now, it is a follow-up to Nier Automata.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's the one. Nier 3 will sell more than Automata, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Because man, what the exponential climb? I think we're basically at the point where Automata has sold 10 times more than the original run of Replicate, something like
way more than that.
Yeah,
way more than that.
Yeah.
So I think the original run of sold 500,000. I think Automata's on 7.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah. So we're at more than 10 times the sales.
And then we just need Nier 3 to sell 10 times more than Nier Automata, and we'll be good. That's the exponential growth.
Yep.
It can be the new GTA.
I could see it happening. All right, I think we're gonna wrap things up there. Darryl, you could tell everyone about any upcoming projects if you like. If you want to plug anything. I know the book is still sold out.
We've actually almost finished shipping. We should have everything shipped out by Saturday or next Wednesday at the latest, and that'll be all like 2,000 plus books finally fulfilled, despite God knows how many postal strikes. I don't know if you knew about this, Ryan, but like
No.
a Baltic state hacked our national mail service in January, like. So we weren't allowed to, like, the entire country was not allowed to ship anything internationally for like 3 weeks.
What?
Yeah, like of all the bad luck we could have, like, it's ridiculous. Like, yeah, like in like late November, we basically had that. We planned to have the book all shipped out by December, but like late November, our local post office flooded.
Wow.
There was closed for 2 weeks. It came back. And then within the week it came back, they had a massive power failure. So they were closed for another week. And then our postal service striked in the build up to Christmas. So, like, you know, that was a double whammy. When things kind of got back to normal at the beginning of January, because they'd like caught up with all the Christmas craziness and the strikes happening, then the Royal Mail got hacked. After another strike at the beginning of the year as well, and so we basically couldn't start shipping again. But we had 2 months where we basically couldn't ship. And so yeah, we've been like desperately trying to like get stuff out as quick as possible, because like we started shipping in October, I think. So it's been like 4 or 5 months of just shipping, and it's like, as much as everyone's like frustrated about not getting it, like for us, we're like, it's just like we want it to just be done. We want it to be done, you know?
Yeah, that means you guys need to overwhelm them again. With all the orders.
And like you think like it's taking up space in my brain, and like once that's done, I can start thinking about like the next thing we want to work on, like because like we want to try and do another book this year. I don't know. I know what it's going to be. There's some potentials, but I'm pretty sure what it's going to be. I'm hoping to announce it like within like 4 or 5 months time. So it won't be like a kind of like a drop like we did last time. I'll try and do a little bit beforehand. But like right now, in terms of what we're working on, so I'm sure you've watched like the complete history of Square, right, Ryan? I think.
Yes, amazing.
So we, as I did the first 2 parts of that, and like it just, the scope of it just destroyed me. Like it was one of those things where, and this is where I say I have sympathy for Square. Because like my initial plan was to do like the whole thing in a 45-minute documentary. I ended up doing like the first 2 years of the company's life in a 45-minute documentary. God. And then like the next part was like an hour, and I'd only got up to the release of Final Fantasy I think. So that was already like 2 hours. And then by that point, like the next part is like, you know, you're talking about the origins of the Saga franchise, and like there's all these other games, like you had Hanjaku Hero, the failed like Seiken Densetsu, like there's and you have all these different employees. So like by this point you've got like three different teams working on things, and like trying to plot their careers, but also so you got those three teams, the individual employees and kind of what they were doing, but also all of the business decisions Square were making at the same time, and trying to like feed those into like a coherent narrative was just like it just kind of like, I don't know, and I would always find new cool things that I wanted to talk about. Like, so in part 4, which I don't know if it's ever going to see the light of day, I found this whole thing about like Square used to release offline RPGs. So like when Final Fantasy 1 came out, and this is like a genius idea, like I never even knew it existed, and I don't know if you knew this. When Final Fantasy 1 came out, they released an offline version of it for people that didn't like video games. So like you could, but it wasn't the same story. It was like an alternate side story, or they had like 2 or 3. So there was one where it was like 2 characters, and they were trying to beat the Kraken. Right, and there was a story to beat the Kraken in the Water Shrine. And like they had all these like side stories, but they were like offline RPGs.
When you say offline, you mean like kind of like tabletop or almost, or like what do you mean by?
They were like books. So like, you know,
Oh.
like choose your own adventure books kind of thing.
Oh,
So
wow, yeah.
yeah, so you could go through and you'd be like, okay, so you've encountered this enemy. Like, what do you want to do? If you want to do this, go to page such and such. Kind of those things. So like, people could be absorbed in the story without having to play the game and like the world and like it's really cool. And I found like this. Like, they released a ton of them. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, there was tons of these things. Like, it was like I think there was 3 books for Final Fantasy 1, 3 books for Final Fantasy 2. And yeah, like they're all like alternate stories. So like in one of them, like I think Guy is the main character or something. Like he's or no, like they merged Maria with no in one of the stories, Firion dies.
Oh.
Yeah, like so like the main cast die in that initial encounter.
Right.
You know, they fight against the Black Knight right at the beginning, and it's that defeat that then makes them go. Leon gets kidnapped, and then they go off to their camp to become freedom fighters. In the book, they all die right at the beginning, and then like it follows another cast who are like becoming freedom fighters, and like it's super weird. Like
that is weird, but that's so cool though too.
But yeah, like so yeah, like I would write like a couple of thousand words on that, and then I'm like, okay, well, what am I gonna like?
Yeah.
I don't want to like. So I had all these things, but yeah, so that's on hiatus. But what I'm doing instead is a massive, long-winded. I don't know. This is why my videos end up being like 3 hours long all the time. We're creating something called Project Historia. So it's going to be like a really meaty like retelling of like the entire history of the Final Fantasy franchise. So like I'm working on episode 1 at the moment, which is going to be focused on Final Fantasy 1, and like there's going to be some crossover with the Computer Square, but bearing in mind that like the part that I talked about Final Fantasy 1 in was like 50 minutes. I'm expecting the Final Fantasy 1 like isolated part documentary series to be around 75 to 90 minutes long. So like an hour and a half talking basically about the creation of like and kind of like the legacy of Final Fantasy 1.
Right.
At the moment I've got chapter 1 complete, which is basically like the setup of like why this game even exists. And like one of the cool things we're doing is like and this is apologies if this is too much of a plug, but like
no, you're good. Go
on Patreon, we're doing this thing called like living documentaries, where basically like the people can vote on how they want the documentary to spread out. So like I gave people the option, like, do you want me to spend time focusing on Wizardry or Ultima or Dragon Quest? So they've like picked which direction they want me to go in to try and help me control scope as well, because otherwise it would go crazy. And like, you know, there were so many staff members that worked in the original game. They're going to like help me pick which ones they want me to focus more on in terms of their contributions to the game. And then like after it's published, I'm going to carry on working on the documentary. So it's going to keep getting longer and longer and longer. And then like and they'll get access to like these expanded cuts. And then like in a year's time or 2 years time, like the updated version of the documentary will then be published, which will be like half an hour, 45 minutes longer with all this extra stuff put in. So like eventually it will contain like segments around Wizardry and Ultima and like even the Legends of Zelda and like all these different games that like help to influence the creation of the game. And like there'll be hopefully like detailed profiles about every single member of staff who worked on it, and like I'll be talking about all the different games that spawned afterwards and kind of what they brought, and I'll be talking about the game books that I mentioned, like all these different things that like relate to this game. I could probably make like a 3-4 hour video about it.
Yeah. Dude, that's super exciting. Yeah.
I'm just trying to control the scope. See, that's what we're working on at the moment, like behind the scenes. Like if you want like access to it, like we're doing like I'm trying to make it very collaborative with Patreon, so it's not like a kind of surprise. You know, we're working on it together, which is quite cool. Outside of that, what are we working on? I don't know, actually. Just putting more content out, really. Like
16 season.
I feel as though I'm gonna try and control myself with 16. Actually, like I don't want to go too crazy with it, like and burn myself out. Like I've done the preview and like I've done the video. I spent a lot of time on it, and like that's it for me for now. I did my MA yesterday, and I'm obviously talking to you now.
Right.
But I think like I'm just gonna kind of remove myself from it a little bit now, and then kind of wait for the next thing, and like and like then kind of go back into it, and then just kind of work on some other stuff. So yeah, we put out the video. Don't know how it's doing actually. There was a video that went live when the stream went live.
Oh, wow.
Seems to be doing all right. So that was about games that you'll never get to play because they got cancelled.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna put that one on when I go to the gym today in just a bit here. All right, I think.
Then,
yeah.
Sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say I think that's probably a good place to end it. So we're gonna go ahead and call it a stream right there. I want to thank you so much for coming on again. Great friend, inspiration to me. Really looking forward to your projects and hearing more about those like choose your own adventure books. That's super like fascinating that I didn't even know those existed at all.
I really want to get my hands on one of them.
Yeah.
Like, super rare.
Are any of them in English? I don't imagine.
No.
Yeah, you'd have to like pay for a translator to like really get the full worth out of
the
it.
gist of it. Yeah.
All right, you guys. If you're watching this on YouTube later on, be sure to check out Final Fantasy Union. There will be a link in the description below. And as always, I'll see you guys all next time. Later.